Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to the sprint race watch along for the 2022 Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Great to have all of you here for this sprint race, which might actually be the first great sprint race we're going to have in F1 history. I know obviously last year's sprint race at the same Grand Prix was probably the best one we've had so far. You know, Lewis Hamilton coming through the pack with obviously a much faster car and coming up to, I think, 5th place in, 24 laps. And obviously today's sprint race, 24 laps as well. But with the starting grid we have for today's sprint race, it's going to be very exciting. And because obviously it rained yesterday, there might be some rain around later, you never know. It's very difficult with Interlagos and Sao Paulo to know when the rain is going to fall, as you may know from previous Brazilian or Sao Paulo Grand Prix, whatever you want to call this Grand Prix. So yeah, if some rain falls, it could really make things very exciting as well. You know, because it rained yesterday, there's not a lot of rubber down on the track, so who knows how that's going to affect the cars. And as well, what do you call it? With all the teams and at this track, because the lap of the track is one of the shortest, I think, on the calendar. It might be the second or third shortest on the calendar. That means the gaps between all the teams is actually a lot smaller than it is normally. And I think at this point of the season, I actually think maybe not from, you know, Red Bull, who are the fastest team, to the midfield, but definitely from Ferrari and Mercedes back to the midfield. The gap from them to the midfield isn't actually as big as it probably was midway through the season or at the start of the season. Maybe it was with Mercedes a bit closer, but with Ferrari, that gap's definitely close. And obviously with Ferrari out position on the grid, with Mercedes having one of their cars out position on the grid, it does make things very exciting for this sprint. And we know that also Mercedes do struggle with overtaking slower cars because they lack the raw straight line speed to get their way past slower cars. So I think we are going to have a very interesting sprint race, at least for the very first, say, 10 laps. Maybe after that might get a bit stale, who knows, but let's hope it is exciting. And let's hope that this man, Kevin Magnussen, who is starting the sprint race on pole position, his first ever pole position in his Formula 1 career, and the first pole position for Haas F1, a very well deserved for how hard, yeah, they have worked in F1, and it's the first American team to get pole position in F1 since the Shadow team in 1975, the 1975 British Grand Prix, where Tom Price, the Welsh driver, was on pole position that day at Silverstone. So yeah, it was a very historic day yesterday, definitely the surprise of the season. And yeah, it was a great day yesterday, and hopefully that just continues on into today's sprint race and the race on Sunday as well. Again, great to have you guys here, as always. Great to see you all here. And no matter what time it is in your part of the world or where you're from, all right, I hope you're all having as best a day as possible, given whatever circumstances you are going through. Good to see all of you here as normal. And as well, quickly, apologies that the stream did go live 15 minutes later than usual. I did get the stream ready, but then I remembered that I needed to do the starting grid graphic that I normally do right before we get into the session itself. And obviously it's a sprint race and we don't do sprint races that much in F1. I mean, we've had, 21 races this season. This is the 21st. And this is only the 3rd sprint weekend of the season. So yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I've got it all together. And yeah, for the next hour and 40 minutes, of course, I will be, and you guys will probably be as well, previewing what's going to happen in this sprint race. What we're going to be getting into is obviously all the teams, how they did yesterday, getting into where they're starting on the grid, and looking at then what most likely their result will be from this Grand Prix. And looking at also some dark horses out there that could really spring a surprise, and really just certain teams and maybe drivers as well to look out for in this sprint race. So that is what we are going to be looking at in this preview. And as well, we will get into the sector time data and maximum speed trap data as well from qualifying, because it does show some interesting things from qualifying that we need to look at. So yeah, we'll get into that soon enough. But yeah, we'll start with the top teams in a moment. But let's first get into the qualifying results from yesterday. And here we go. So this is the starting grid for today's sprint race. Kevin Magnussen on pole position. What a superb job he did. Max Verstappen second. George Russell will start third despite his crash in the end of qualifying that caused the red flag and pretty much ended the session. And then Lando Norris will line up alongside him in fourth place with Carlos Sainz in fifth, Esteban Ocon sixth, Alonso seventh, Hamilton eighth, Perez ninth, and Charles Leclerc in P10. And then the rest of the order outside the top 10, Alex Albon in P11, very impressive performance by Albon. And then Gasly 12th, Vettel 13th, Ricciardo 14th, Stroll 15th, Latifi 16th, and then Zhou, and let me just do the final three positions there so you can see it. Bottas, Tsunoda, and Schumacher. So that is the starting grid for the sprint race. And again, it is a very exciting starting grid. It's a shame that it's not the actual Sunday Grand Prix, to be honest. But I think we'll still get something pretty entertaining or exciting in this sprint coming up in just under 1 hour and 40 minutes from now. As well, when we get into the sector time data, I know it might be a bit skewed because in Q1 they did do all the drivers their best times on the soft tyres. Q2 it was a normal dry session, but then Q3 they went slower, everyone in the top 10, than they did in Q2 because it started to rain. But the sector time data will still show us where certain teams are quicker than others. So that's why we are going to be looking at it. And definitely with the speed trap data, it will be very relevant to this sprint race. Looking out for what certain cars to look out for when it comes to overtaking in this Grand Prix today. So yeah, we will get into that data soon enough. And we have already had today a practice session. It was practice 2. Let's get into the results of that session now. So obviously not very relevant session. The second practice session really is just for the teams to test out what the car feels like on the fuel load for the sprint race and to, see what the tyres are like and get a good idea of what tyres really they want to start on, which I'm guessing most people are going to start on the medium compound. I remember last year for the sprint at the same Grand Prix, I think most people were on the medium and the soft compound tyre was, from lap 10 until the end of lap 24, the end of the sprint, it was falling off quite badly. So yeah, I think we will see the medium compound tyre definitely used the most out of all the other compounds. But yeah, the order in practice 2, just so you want to know, just so you guys know, is Esteban Ocon, Sergio Perez, George Russell, Fernando Alonso, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Pierre Gasly, Mick Schumacher, Kevin Magnussen, Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz, Yuki Tsunoda, Charles Leclerc, Daniel Ricciardo, Valtteri Bottas, Nicholas Latifi, Lance Stroll, Sebastian Vettel, Zhou Guanyu, and Logan Sargent, who did the entire of practice 2, because obviously he is racing, we think, for Williams next year. He's been announced by Williams, but he does still need the super license points to be racing for Williams next year and needs to finish top 5 in the F2 Championship to get that. The last round of the F2 season is next weekend, along with, the last round of the F1 season as well. So, yeah, he should finish in the top 5 of the championship, Sargent, as long as he has pretty much, if he gets the results that he's been on average getting this season in F2, he should be absolutely fine to get that. And yeah, did 28 laps, which is good for him to get, a load of laps in the Williams car. And obviously the Williams car will be, much quicker next year, as will all the cars next year. They'll be a lot quicker than they were this year as they continue to find even more better ways and, getting the downforce out of the car. But, yeah, it's good to see that he got a very good amount of laps in because it's it's difficult for reserve drivers, I think, who then become academy drivers who then become proper race drivers for that same team the next season, because if you don't get an adequate amount of laps in, and even in some circumstances, if the car next year that you're driving is a completely different car because of a new set of regulations, it is very hard for those types of drivers. But thankfully for Logan, next year's cars are exactly the same as this year's cars, but except, again, the Williams car, as all the cars, will have more downforce next year. And hopefully for Williams, next year they turn up with a bit of a faster car than what we saw in 2022. But now let's go on to the teams, and we'll start with, of course, Red Bull Racing. And Red Bull, they're probably a tad disappointed with what happened in the in qualifying. But looking back, I don't think they should be massively disappointed, really, because Max Verstappen, yes, he's not on pole, he's in second place, but he will pass Kevin Magnussen and win the sprint race most likely today. The only driver I think possibly that could affect him today, the only driver I thought could have affected him today was Charles Leclerc, but that was only if Leclerc was, up alongside him on the grid, which of course he is not. Leclerc is down in P10, with again Verstappen in second on the front row of the grid. So, George Russell behind, I don't think he needs to worry about, because I think Red Bull will easily have the pace to be ahead of Mercedes and Russell. Yeah, the start of the race, obviously, there is a chance Russell could get ahead of Verstappen, but because Max has the inside line for turn 1, as long as he gets a good run, fast enough run through turn 1, then he should avoid, Russell just sailing around the outside of him into the first corner. But, yeah, for Verstappen, I think he definitely wins the sprint race, because, again, I don't think there's any other drivers or cars that can really stop him. For Sergio Perez, again, it's disappointing, down in P9, and the lap he did, he just didn't do a good enough lap in the end. But, again, looking at the grid, I don't think you can be massively disappointed, because looking at the cars ahead of him, obviously Magnussen, he will pass at some point during the sprint race, even though, yes, it's only 24 laps. We know the Red Bull is so much faster than the Haas car in normal dry conditions, and even in the wet, I think you're going to see Perez probably overtake Magnussen, because the Red Bull, again, is just so much quicker. So he will get past Magnussen, he will pass Ocon and Alonso in the Alpines, and he will pass Lando Norris. That means the only 3 cars ahead of him that he needs to worry about overtaking is George Russell in the Mercedes, Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, and Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. Now, with Hamilton, if he gets a very good run on Hamilton out of the final corner, Jinsal, turn 12, he should be able to overtake him into turn 1, because the Red Bull is so much quicker down the straights this weekend, as we've seen already, and I'll show you in the speed trap data the clear evidence to show that. So, really, if he gets, again, that good exit from the final corner, even if Lewis Hamilton has DRS from a car ahead, he should be able to go for the move into turn 1. But if Hamilton doesn't have DRS from a car ahead, then really it should be a done deal, because the Red Bull is so quick in the first and third sector because of their straight line speed. And then, if he gets past him, Carlos Sainz, if Sainz has a good start and he gets himself far enough up the road away from Perez, then Perez probably won't be able to get after him. And then George Russell in third place. Russell, I think, will most likely finish second in the sprint today. And yeah, because Russell is so much further up the grid, I don't think Perez will have enough pace to come through and get ahead of Russell before the end of the sprint. So, realistically, Sergio Perez will finish 4th in the sprint race today. But because Carlos Sainz has a 5-place grid penalty for Sunday's race because of a new ICE, that means he'd be starting 3rd. Which is why I say, as long as he can get past Lewis Hamilton in this sprint race, and obviously Ocon, Alonso, Norris and Magnussen as well, then even if Sainz and Russell finish ahead of him, it doesn't really matter because third place would still be a pretty good starting position for him. He would still have plenty of opportunities to beat Russell in the race, and it would be very hard for Russell and Mercedes to keep Perez behind. So, yeah, I don't think it's too much of a disaster, the starting grid. And thankfully, because they're at a track, Red Bull, that is probably one of their best tracks of the season with the way their car is, it's looking very good for them, I think, still. So if you're a Red Bull fan or a fan of, Verstappen and Perez, yeah, I don't think you need to really panic that much. I think as long as the drivers keep it clean, don't get hit by anyone, and, they show the pace we've seen in the dry already this weekend, then they should be able to fly through the field and get a pretty good starting position for the race. But yeah, I'm going to go for first and fourth in the sprint race. Verstappen winning the sprint from Perez in fourth. And then Perez obviously will start the race tomorrow, from third because of Carlos Sainz's penalty. So yeah, that's what I think is going to happen for Red Bull. Let me know in the chat, what do you think is going to happen for Red Bull? Do you think they are the favourites to win the sprint today? I think it's very hard, honestly, to think of other, teams and drivers that, that really could challenge Verstappen today. Again, the only driver I could think of is a Leclerc, maybe even a Carlos Sainz. And the reason I say that is because on lower fuel, Ferrari do tend to be just, a lot quicker. And with a shorter race distance, yeah, Ferrari seem to be more of a threat than they are in a 70 lap or 71 lap Grand Prix that we're going to be getting on Sunday. So yeah, I think Red Bull definitely the favourites here. Going on to Ferrari, qualifying for them was a disaster, really. So Carlos Sainz ending up in fifth. To be honest, it wasn't really that bad of a result for him, considering he will probably beat Norris and Magnussen ahead of him on the grid in this sprint anyway. And even if he qualified in third place, I don't think he would win the sprint today. And if he did finish up in second place, say for the sprint, then he would start, because of his 5-place penalty, back on the fourth row of the grid anyway. But because, like I said, I think he's going to finish in third, he'll still start on the fourth row of the grid in 8th position. So, Carlos Sainz, should be fine. I don't think we'll see anything spectacular from him. I just think, at the end of the day, he'll pass Norris and Magnussen. Norris will be easy to pass because Norris, I don't think, is really going to try and defend from him. I think Norris is really just focusing on outscoring the Alpines, and hopefully Ricciardo and the other McLaren can join him in the points. Obviously, points only go for the top 8, so it'd be hard for Ricciardo in 14th. But yeah, for Carlos Sainz, Norris will be easy to pass. And then with Kevin Magnussen, the Ferrari, even though it lacks pace with a longer lap distance, race distance, whatever you want to call it, they should be able to beat Magnussen because we know the Ferrari is much quicker than the Haas car. So yeah, they should be absolutely fine with Carlos Sainz to finish in third. For Charles Leclerc, though, what a disaster Q3 was. Ferrari split the strategy, sent Leclerc out on intermediate tyres and Sainz out on soft tyres, and they thought that, with Leclerc rather, that if it started to rain, say 4 or 5 minutes earlier than it actually did, that he would be in the perfect position. And the thing is, I mean, at the end of the day, you do have to, sit back and say, yeah, that was the wrong decision. But that is mostly in hindsight. To be honest, I'm not really going to criticize them that heavily about it. At the end of the day, they got it wrong, and it was dry at the time. But looking at the weather forecast and looking at how the weather, came in, 2 or 3 minutes after those first and only laps in Q3 were done, it was worth the risk because, Kevin Magnussen getting pole was mostly down to him being the first driver out of the pit lane at the start of Q3. And because Leclerc was not the first driver out of the pit lane, he probably wouldn't have got pole position anyway. So, to be honest, it was probably worth the gamble. So to be honest, I'm not really going to criticize them that much. They tried a gamble, it didn't work. That's all right. And so now he obviously starts in P10. Ocon, Alonso, Norris, and Magnussen. Like I said, he should be able to beat because obviously he's a very quick driver. We know the Ferrari car is a lot quicker this weekend than it was in Mexico, and is a lot quicker anyway than those cars, the McLaren, Alpine, and Haas cars. So, really, Leclerc, what he needs to focus on, if he can, is beating Perez and Hamilton. That's the key for his race tomorrow, because if he does beat Perez and Hamilton, and does obviously get ahead and beat Norris, Ocon, Alonso, Magnussen, then he'll start the race from third on the grid, which honestly would be a pretty good recovery from him and Ferrari if they were to get that. But realistically, I don't think they are going to be able to do it. I think Charles Leclerc will end up finishing the sprint today in 6th place. And the reason I say that is because at the start of the race here in Brazil, it's pretty hard actually to make up on the first lap a load of positions, because at the run down to the first corner is very short and it's not very wide. And then the run down to turn 4 on the first lap, there's not much room with these very big wide cars. So I don't think Leclerc's really going to be able to make much headway on the cars ahead. So yeah, I think he'll beat Norris, Ocon, Alonso, and Magnussen, but he just won't have the pace, unfortunately, from Ferrari's perspective and Leclerc's perspective, to keep up with Hamilton and Perez ahead, and obviously Verstappen, Russell, and Sainz either. So yeah, Charles Leclerc, I think, will end up finishing in 6th in the sprint, and that means he'll start 5th on the grid, if it played out exactly like I thought, with Carlos Sainz finishing 3rd in the sprint. So yeah, to be honest, if that does happen, if it does play out like that and Leclerc starts the race tomorrow from 5th and Carlos Sainz starts the race from 8th, because Ferrari have, in race conditions at the moment, the 3rd quickest car behind Red Bull and Mercedes, it probably means they're destined to finish in 5th and 6th in the race tomorrow. So it is a bit unfortunate in the way things played out yesterday. But yeah, they just, the drivers couldn't deliver the laps they could. Obviously, Leclerc was not given a proper chance because he's on intermediate tyres. But again, it was, I think, worth a gamble. And with Carlos Sainz, he was, a bit further down in the pack when starting those laps for the first, laps in Q3. So there was not much really Carlos Sainz could do. So yeah, sad for Ferrari, because they are a lot quicker in reality this weekend in qualifying trim, single lap qualifying. I think they're definitely the 2nd quickest car in dry or even wet conditions, and I think they would be probably on the front row of the grid if there was a normal dry qualifying session. Well, actually, maybe not in a normal dry qualifying session, sorry, probably in a wet session. Yeah, I'd say they're probably, they'd probably be on the front row of the grid. Even in dry conditions, they'd probably be, 2nd row of the grid, 3rd and 4th. So, yeah, it is a bit unfortunate how things have played out. But, with the gamble they took, it was probably the best thing to do looking back in hindsight. Because, well, not looking back in hindsight, because obviously in hindsight, it was the wrong thing to do. But, Ferrari, they exist to win races and to do the best they can and to finish P1 in every session if they can. They weren't going to beat Max Verstappen in qualifying yesterday if they went on the dry tyres, especially with Verstappen ahead of Leclerc and Sainz in the pack that were released from the pit lane at the start of Q3. It was just never going to happen. So yeah, it was worth the gamble. I know you guys might be a bit surprised that I've not gone absolutely in on them, but really, I think it's a bit harsh to go in on them because you can only really do it in hindsight. And obviously hindsight is a wonderful thing that we don't have access to. So, yeah. 3rd and 6th for the sprint today. Not great, but it's the best really I think they can manage considering the pace of the Ferrari car. Now on to Mercedes-Benz. I think qualifying was actually pretty good actually for them. Third and eighth. I know obviously third and eighth doesn't sound that great for them, but considering, you know, if qualifying was held in normal dry conditions, I think they were going to finish probably in 5th and 6th place. Maybe even worse than that because of the straight line speed that other midfield teams behind them have that may have upset the order there, which we have seen a couple times, you know, this season. So, yeah, it was actually a good result for them because, you know, Russell, despite his accident in Q3, which was a simple driving error, you know, touching the grass on the far right-hand side of the track, or just off the track, and that obviously caused him to go towards the gravel, then spin around and get back in the gravel again. To be honest, though, I think his car was already damaged from the bouncing through the gravel because he did bounce through quite heavily. Did George Russell? So yeah, there's nothing really he would have been able to do even if he got out of the gravel trap. But yeah, third on the grid is still a very good result for him. He'll beat Magnussen in the race today. I know the Haas car is quicker probably down the straights, but we know the Mercedes is way quicker in all other parts of the track, so he will be able eventually to get a great run on Magnussen and overtake him into turn 1 or turn 4 here at Interlagos. And then he will then most likely finish up in second in the sprint, and then he'll be on the front row for the race on Sunday, which is pretty good for him because, again, I don't think Mercedes came here thinking a front row start for Sunday's race, given the track layout, was really that possible. But, you know, that's the opportunity they now have, and I think they will take it. I think we'll see Russell finishing second and on the front row. And then for Lewis Hamilton, yeah, I think Sergio Perez behind him, I think will just have too much pace, and we know Perez has performed very well this season. This has been one of Perez's best, if not his best season in F1. He's been very good this season. So, yeah, I think Perez behind in what is a very quick Red Bull car will be just a bit too difficult to stop. He will, though, overtake Alonso, Ocon, Norris, and Magnussen, I think, eventually. The only issue with Hamilton is if Ocon and Alonso get DRS from the back of Norris and there's a train that begins to form, that's normally where Mercedes become a bit stuck in the mud when it comes to, you know, them making progress through the field. We saw that in the sprint race in Austria where Hamilton crashed in Friday qualifying, started 10th, then he got held up by the Haases because they had DRS. I think Schumacher had DRS on the back of Magnussen, and then that caused a bit of a train to form, and Hamilton just couldn't break it, despite trying very hard and getting very close to breaking it. So that's the only thing to worry about in regards to Lewis Hamilton and his race today. But I do think he will finish in 5th place in the sprint today, but because of Sainz's penalty, he'll start the race then from 4th, which, yes, 2nd and 4th for Mercedes, that would be a very good starting position. And I think there's a very good chance then, very, very good chance then, of at least one podium with one of their cars, rather than, you know, a double podium, which I think might be a bit difficult. They might have to rely on, you know, one of the Red Bulls having a serious issue in the race, whether it's a really bad pit stop, or, or, you know, a reliability issue for them. So, yeah, Mercedes will be fine today, but yeah, just need to watch out for that when it comes to Lewis Hamilton, whether that DRS train, which can form, we've seen that in the sprint races before, it can form, and that could be an issue for Lewis Hamilton. Hopefully it isn't too much of an issue from Hamilton's perspective. But before, guys, we go into the midfield teams, I want to know from you guys in the live chat, who do you think is going to come out on top in the sprint race today? I'm going to do a poll in the chat in a moment, and you can also just comment it in the chat if you want. Just want to say quickly before I do that, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because I do race watch-alongs, qualifying watch-alongs, sprint race watch-alongs when even they're taking place for all, you know, Grand Prix, you know, during the season. And yeah, obviously we'll be live for the sprint race, and then we'll be doing a reaction to that, you know, once that comes later on tonight. And tomorrow I will be live at 4 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race begins in Brazil. The race starts at 6 p.m. UK time, so from 4 till 5:30 I'll be doing a race preview. 5:30 p.m. UK time till 8 p.m. will be the race watch-along. The race starts again 6 p.m. UK time. And then from 8 till 9 p.m. UK time will be the race reaction. So yeah, make sure, if you are new to the channel, to subscribe for more content like this. And for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash that like button. Obviously does help the channel grow. And don't forget as well to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 or ChazzaHD on Twitter to keep up with content on my channel and just, what I'm up to in general. So yeah, I'll set that poll up now and then we'll get into the sector time and speed trap data. Let me just do that quickly. Oh yeah, and another thing I need to let you guys know of. Let me just do this question quickly. Who do you think will win the sprint race? Hold on. In Brazil? And the options I'll give you are Verstappen. I'll put Magnussen in there because obviously starting on pole. I don't think anyone... Well, there probably will be some people voting for him, but I think realistically we know he's not going to win. But it would be amazing if he did. So I'll put Verstappen, Magnussen, Russell, and Sainz as the options. Hamilton, Perez, Leclerc, I think that's a bit too ambitious, to be honest, to expect that. So, there you go. And that poll is now at the top of the live chat. So make sure to vote on that poll. Who do you think will win the sprint race? And I'll end the poll right before we get into the sprint race itself. So make sure to keep voting. Let's get as many votes as we can out of everyone watching. And then, yeah, I'll make sure to get into those results right before we get started with the sprint race itself. One thing I did want to say quickly, before we get into the sector time and speed trap data from qualifying yesterday, is my co-commentator Niblo will not be joining me this evening, and he also will not be joining me for the race tomorrow. The reason is because, again, the timing is awful for him, because obviously he's in Melbourne, Australia. And, we've had, was it Brabham Oz in the chat? You guys know he's a regular, the Discord and the YouTube side as well. Even he said yesterday that it was, I think he started tuning in at 5:45 in the morning, and that was like 15 minutes before qualifying, which was 7 p.m. UK time yesterday. So with the race at 6 p.m. UK time yesterday, it's going to be, like 5 a.m. So, yeah, he just won't be able to be up at that time because it's just a really bad time. But I did ask him, are you able to come on for Abu Dhabi? And he said, yes, I will be on for Abu Dhabi. So don't worry, he will be on for the final race. Obviously, the final race next weekend, and it's 5 hours earlier, the race start time, so it'd be midnight for him, which is good enough for him. Obviously he doesn't want to wreck his sleeping pattern, which I understand, because he has to wreck it plenty of times anyway, and he doesn't want to wreck it too much because he wants to have an actual life outside of just watching sports all the time, which is completely understandable, and yeah, a good thing that he is doing that. So yeah, he won't be on this weekend, but he will be on next weekend for the race watch-along. Probably won't be on for the season review that I'm going to do later that evening, because, again, it'll just be too late for him. But what I will do is, during the race build-up, I will try and get him on maybe a bit earlier and, ask him some thoughts about some of the teams and drivers for this season, just to get his thoughts on the F1 season for 2022. So, yeah, that's what's happening next Sunday. It feels weird that the F1 season's literally going to end in the next 8 days. It feels very, very weird, I've got to be honest. But, yeah, that's the plan on that end. Obviously, on Sunday, I will, after the race has finished and when I come to the end of that stream, I will get into what my content plan is for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. And I will... next Thursday, give you guys, I'll post on my community tab on my homepage, displaying what the exact schedule and plan is. So don't worry about, not knowing what the plan is. I will let you guys know well in advance. But yeah, make sure to keep voting in that poll at the top of the live chat. Who do you think won the sprint race? Verstappen, Magnussen, Russell, or Sainz? Let me know right now in the chat for the next hour or so. And then, yeah, probably in exactly an hour or just over an hour from now, I'll finish the poll and then read out the results. So now, one thing I will need to do is hide the timer because I have to reset it once I come back from these bits of data. So don't worry, I will get it back on screen in probably 5 to 10 minutes from now. But let's get into the data from yesterday. So obviously Kevin Magnussen, you will notice, isn't at the very top of the sectors because the best times in qualifying yesterday were not in Q3. So really, these sector times are from Q2, but it does give us a good indication as to who is quick in what parts of the track. So looking at the top teams, Sector 1, it's pretty much, absolutely, tied the pace between, say, Ferrari and Red Bull. Not sure if that's the best way of putting it, but you know what I mean. It's pretty much equal on pace in that first sector between Ferrari and Red Bull. I think the reason that probably was in qualifying yesterday, and might be just in general, is because the first sector is quite short, so you're not going to get a massive gap between, Red Bull and Ferrari in the first sector. But also, what do you call it? In the first sector, you do have turn 1, which is a medium speed corner at at best in qualifying trim, with obviously a lot less fuel. And then turn 2 is a bit of a medium speed corner as well. So, that does help Ferrari in that first sector. But then obviously after that, it's full power until the end of the first sector. So yeah, that's why Ferrari and Red Bull are level in that sector. You can see though, Kevin Magnussen very quick in the first sector. And as well, very quick in the final sector as well. So the Haas car, as normal, very quick in a straight line. And then the second sector, you can see that, Ferrari very, very quick in that second sector. And really, if they're going to get those overtakes done as quickly as possible in the sprint today, they've got to make sure they are absolutely all over the back of whatever car is ahead of them during that middle sector, because that's where they are so quick. And you can see with Charles Leclerc, he's half a second quicker than just Esteban Ocon in that sector, and Lando Norris as well. So yeah, he needs to, and Ferrari need to utilize that the best way they can in the middle sector. And yeah, Ferrari definitely quicker in that middle sector than Red Bull, which is not a surprise because the middle sector is mostly slow corners, which do suit Ferrari better than Red Bull. But the final sector, you can see it then plays back into Red Bull's hands because Verstappen second quickest in the final sector, and he is a 1/10 of a second, almost a 1/10 and a half quicker than the quickest Ferrari. So yeah, overall for the lap, I think in qualifying trim, you could argue that Ferrari maybe might have had the pace to snatch pole yesterday, especially with the way the conditions were. I still think Red Bull in Q3, if it had remained dry, I still think Red Bull would have ended up on pole with Verstappen. But looking at these sector times, Ferrari were very, very quick in qualifying yesterday. But because of what happened in Q3 and their tyre choice and how far back in the pack they were, they just couldn't utilize and really show as much of that as they did, say, in Q2. Looking after that, so yeah, I'd say Red Bull in dry conditions, I still think are the quicker team, but with lower fuel on board, Ferrari definitely right there. Maybe we'll see some of that in this sprint race coming up as well in, an hour and 5 minutes from now. And then for Mercedes, not really a massive surprise with where, actually a bit of a surprise in certain parts of the track, but most parts of the track, it's not really a surprise what their pace was like. George Russell 1/10 of a second slower than Verstappen and Sainz in the first sector. Yeah, not really a surprise. We know the Mercedes car not very quick in a straight line. Sector 2, not really a surprise, but also, I'd say not really a surprise, actually, when it comes to Mercedes in that middle sector, because even though there are no straights in the middle sector, and there are, lots of corners, we've seen so many times this season, and I've said it so many times, in slow speed corners, the Mercedes car is very poor. The drivers know it, the team know it, The car just doesn't have good mechanical grip. And that's why you've seen them at street circuits this year be not very quick. Especially Monaco and Baku. That's why they were so slow there, because they just didn't have anywhere near the level of mechanical grip that Ferrari and Red Bull have. Ferrari probably have the best mechanical grip on the grid, to be honest. But yeah, Mercedes, half a second slower in the middle sector. So yeah, that's going to be very hard to contend with. The only thing from Mercedes' point of view when it comes to George Russell, if Russell does get ahead of Magnussen quickly, but also Sainz does, then it could be a bit difficult for Russell to keep Sainz behind. Because we know the Ferraris are quicker, we believe, are quicker down the straights. But, Sector 3, Mercedes actually a tad quicker, which is interesting. Must have got a very good exit from the final corner. Or what do you call it? Yeah, we know Ferrari normally are quicker than Mercedes in a straight line. And with Ferrari being so much quicker in the middle sector as well, if Sainz, is able to get past Magnussen and Norris and really start getting after Russell, that might be a bit difficult for Russell to hold on. But he should, I still think, be able to hold on, because we know Ferrari, in more so race trim, they're not as quick and as effective with the strengths of their car in a race situation. So yeah, with Mercedes, I think really in all of the sectors, maybe except for sector 3 where they're slightly quicker than Ferrari, they're lapping pretty much as quickly as I expected them to be. The race on Sunday, they'll definitely be a bit quicker than they have been, so far this weekend, because, we've seen that so many times this season. They're quicker on a Sunday than they are on a Saturday and a Friday, because the car just performs better with heavier fuel on board, and they're able to keep their tyres in better nick than pretty much any other team on the grid. So, yeah, Mercedes will be absolutely fine tomorrow. But, yeah, I think they've got, considering their grid positions, I think they've got enough pace to finish in second and fourth. But it will, or second and fifth, in the sprint, with it obviously turning into second and fourth on the grid for the race with Sainz's penalty. But yeah, I think they'll be fine. Mercedes. And then quickly for the midfield, let's just get into some notable drivers, I guess. Kevin Magnussen, very quick in all the sectors. You have to remember, he didn't just sneak into Q3 barely or anything. He was very quick the whole session. He was in the top 10 in Q1, top 10 in Q2, top 10 and obviously pole position in Q3. He was very quick the whole session, so we have to remember that. And you can see, Sector 1, third quickest. Sector 2, he was, 8th, 9th, something like that. And then Sector 3, he was up in the top 7, in 7th place, just behind the two Mercedes and the Red Bull of Perez there. So he was very quick all session. And I think when Magnussen is going to be at his best, and if he's going to defend position from Norris, Ocon and Alonso, who do have faster cars, I think, all around, and we have seen that this season, especially at this part of the season, that is the case. Really, just getting a good exit from that final corner, proper corner of Jinsao, turn 12, and getting a good exit from turn 1 and turn 2 will be the key, because down the straights, the Haas car should be fine to keep the cars behind, but it's in the middle sector where if the McLaren and Alpine cars are just, swarming all over the back of him, and no matter what Magnussen does, he just can't get enough ahead in the exit of the corners before straights because of the pace that those cars have, then he's going to get overtaken. But if he can get, again, good exits from the corners, he can keep ahead, I reckon, of Norris, Ocon and Alonso. And yeah, P7 or P6 rather, that would then be on the grid. And I think Magnussen, as I'll get onto later, I think he will finish. Hold on, where do I think he will finish? I haven't actually thought about it properly. Probably 7th in the sprint, because the next midfield car behind him is Lando Norris, and we know the McLaren is not very quick in a straight line, and, we don't see the McLaren overtaking that many cars normally down the straights as much as we did, last year in 2021 when it was the quickest car down the straights. So, yeah, Magnussen's looking good. I think he'll definitely be at least in the top 10 on the grid Sunday's race. Lando Norris, I've got to say as well, very, very good, despite being very ill. He even said yesterday he didn't think he'd be driving yesterday, and he did after, recovering from whatever food poisoning he had. And he was 5th in Sector 1, 4th in Sector 2, and then still in the top 10 in Sector 3. McLaren, of course, have improved this car so much in the second half of the season, and they've limited their weaknesses a lot more, and they've improved their strengths a lot more, which does give me a bit of hope for next season that if they can continue that work and continue to close that gap to the front like they have in the second half of the season, that they might have a much better season next year. But yeah, Sector 1, the McLaren, obviously not as quick as the Ferrari, Red Bull and the Mercedes, and probably the Haas as well, but in Sector 1, lapping very well. Sector 2, the McLaren, so quick. The 3rd quickest car in Sector 2. And we saw that at quite a few times in Sector 2 in qualifying yesterday, where Norris was at times doing quicker sectors than Verstappen in the middle sector. So, yeah, very, very impressive from Lando. Sector 3, as expected, drops off because the McLaren car still, its biggest weakness is the straight line speed. That's why he's slower than the Haas, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, Williams, but still lapping respectably in that sector. For Daniel Ricciardo, unfortunately for Ricciardo, he just didn't have the pace at all in any of the sectors. He just fundamentally lacked the pace to be able to get into Q3, which is a shame because I think if he was in like 9th or 10th place, Ricciardo probably could have ended up finishing with maybe a point from this sprint race today. Because we do see that he is better on a race day this season and just is in general, and McLaren car a lot quicker in the race as well. I think than they are sometimes at these higher speed circuits. So yeah, McLaren looking with Lando Norris good, and I think Ricciardo, he'll have the ability to make up progress, but whether he will or not is a completely another thing. Alpine looking good as well. A bit surprised about their lack of pace in the first sector, 8th and 10th, but middle sector very good. Final sector actually a bit surprisingly bad as well. I think just outside the top 10 in the final sector, but yeah, Alpine's pace looks fine. Obviously 6th and 7th on the grid for the sprint. If they can end up like 8th and 9th on the grid, or 9th and 10th, it's really focusing on getting both cars in the top 10 for Sunday's race, then that's really what matters for Alpine. Because, of course, they're in a massive fight with McLaren for the Constructors' Championship, which I will get onto in a moment. The only other things to mention is, yeah, Alex Albon in the final sector. Obviously, in qualifying yesterday, he was very, very good. And, yeah, was the quickest man in the final sector. Not a surprise, the Williams is an absolute bullet in a straight line. So, yeah. Good to see there from Williams. But those are the sector times. Let's now go on to the speed trap data. Hold on, just reading a comment in the chat. A then says, how does it make sense not to have Magnussen on pole? Verstappen crashed out, but he had the fastest overall, so he gets pole position. Not quite sure what you are talking about, to be honest, because Verstappen didn't crash out. I'm just making the point that with the sector time data that, the quickest times in qualifying were set in Q2, so that is the best indication as to who is quick in what parts of the track for us to look at. It's really looking at just the Q3 times and the sector times from that is irrelevant because it was really down to who was the first cars on track. And who made the least mistakes as well. So, yeah, that's really what it came down to in Q3. When in Q2, it was a lot more down to the general pace of the car. I mean, obviously, as the track was rubbering up and gripping up all the time in Q2, that definitely did skew things a bit as well. But still, you could see the fastest team still coming up to the front. Anyway, let's get into the speed traps because obviously I want to get into this to show what teams you need to look out for down the straights this weekend. So the two columns we look at is the two on the left-hand side, this main speed trap, which is at the very end of the pit straight, right before you go into turn 1. The finish line, you can actually see is right before that point where they get to the end of the maximum speed traps is basically the same point. Oh, nearly the same point there. You can see the finish line data. Kevin Magnussen miles ahead of the cars below him. Probably because he got a very good slipstream to the line. I don't know if that was in Q3, probably Q2 with Kevin Magnussen. But yeah, the main speed trap we're going to look at probably then is the one on the left-hand side. So Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen first and second. No surprise there, the Red Bull car is the quickest car out of the top teams in a straight line by a mile. And you can see that, well, Sergio Perez's speed might be a bit exaggerated, probably because of a bit of an extra slipstream, something like that, a bit of a tow down the pit straight. But with Max Verstappen, he's, nearly 2 kilometers an hour quicker than the AlphaTauri of Gasly. Nearly 4 kilometers an hour quicker than the Williams of Alex Albon. And then when you compare him to the next fastest front-running car of Charles Leclerc, he is 6.3 kilometers an hour faster, which is massive. It really, really is. It's a massive amount to be faster in the maximum, or the main speed trap. It really, really is. I mean, I can't remember how much extra kilometers an hour the DRS gives you. I think it's a few kilometers an hour more than just 6, but it's probably half of what the DRS gives you an extra top speed. So it is an enormous amount. And yeah, if Max Verstappen is behind anyone on track, definitely look out for him because he'll be shooting past. I have no doubts about that. And for Sergio Perez, really with the straight line speed that the Red Bull has, he should be fine to get up to at least 4th place in the sprint. Maybe even further if Carlos Sainz or George Russell are struggling with the pace of their cars. And then, yeah, Pierre Gasly, very quick. Not a surprise, really, because the AlphaTauris have been very fast, actually, in the speed traps this season. They've always been top 10 material. And then Alex Albon, yeah, no surprise there, very quick. The 2 Alpines, very quick as well. They tend to be as well pretty much up there in the top 10 most times. Not every time, but most times. The most surprising one, though, actually 3 most surprising, is Ricciardo and Norris. Both McLarens in the top 10 in qualifying for the main speed trap. I don't think I've seen that at all this season. So that is very impressive. And maybe that's a big helping as to why they're so quick with Lando Norris this weekend. So yeah, very good to see there. So look out for McLaren with that extra speed. Sebastian Vettel as well. Very surprising to see him in the top 10 because normally Aston Martin are down the bottom. And then, yeah, Leclerc, Hamilton, Russell as well. Quite slow compared to the 2 Red Bulls in the main speed trap. So, yeah, if there is a Red Bull behind a Ferrari or a Mercedes, it's going to be very hard for the Ferrari or Mercedes car, whatever it is, to keep the Red Bull behind. But, yeah, I'd say for overtaking, look out for the Red Bulls. Obviously, the Ferraris and the Mercedes because they're out of position. But the Red Bulls, the Williamses, AlphaTauris, Alpines, maybe the McLarens as well, because they seem to have very good top-end speed. I will say with the main speed trap as well, from 16th place down, Latifi, Schumacher, Bottas, and Zhou, that's really irrelevant information because, they were, I think they were all knocked out in Q1. Yeah, it's not really relevant, that type of information. I've got to say, surprising that George Russell was only 320 kilometers an hour down the main speed trap when Verstappen was 331. Maybe that was because of another reason, I'm not sure. But if that is legitimately what his top speed is like, then he is going to be in a bit of trouble if a Ferrari or a Red Bull get in his slipstream with DRS wide open. But yeah, Red Bulls, AlphaTauris, obviously the Ferraris and Mercedes as well, Williamses, Alpines, and maybe the McLarens you need to look out for the teams that are going to be making moves in this sprint race. But now I'll cut back to this and I'll just get the timer back on screen for you guys. So don't worry, we just do this quickly. There is, there you go, 50 minutes to go till the sprint race. So not long. Obviously, we've still got a bit to go through. We're still going to be going through the midfield teams in a moment. So yeah, we've still got plenty to go through. And of course, I've got some stats to go through before we get into the sprint. We'll go through the championship standings, and I'll get through the and I'll show on screen what the grid order, with my grid order graphic, I'll show what the starting grid is for this sprint race today. So don't worry, there's plenty coming your way in the next 49 minutes here on stream. And of course, probably in, I don't know, 30, maybe 20 to 30 minutes from now, I'm probably going to post a link of the stream back out so we can get people in for the proper watch-along part of the day. Anyway, let's now go on to McLaren and the rest of the field. So McLaren, yeah, 4th for Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo down in 14th. Norris was one of the stars of qualifying yesterday. There is absolutely no doubt about that. And yeah, for Norris, his main focus has to be, of course, beating Kevin Magnussen. And really, as long as Norris beats the 2 Alpines, that is really all he needs to focus on. And if he did do that, that would be really a great result, because, of course, McLaren are only 7 points behind Alpine in the championship, and you do score points for the sprint. And remember, if Norris was to finish in 7th, behind the top 6, the normal top 6 cars of, Verstappen, Russell, Sainz, Perez, Hamilton, Leclerc, which I think it will be, and Norris finishes in 7th, if Kevin Magnussen then finishes in 8th, if the Alpines finish 9th and 10th, the Alpines won't get any points, but Norris will. He'll get 2 points in 7th place. So that really could be very crucial to McLaren getting 4th back in the championship by the end of the season. The end of the season, of course, next Sunday in Abu Dhabi. So really, what his focus needs to be is beating Magnussen and then hoping that Magnussen can keep the Alpines behind until the end of the sprint race. Maybe even, if Norris gets ahead of Magnussen, maybe let Magnussen stay in his slipstream and maybe have some DRS for a while, just to make sure that the Alpines can't, get after, or not get after, but get past Magnussen. So, yeah, that would be ideal, of course, for Lando Norris. But what is realistic for him? I think he will beat Magnussen in this race today. I'm going to go for Norris finishing in 7th. Magnussen, by the way, I'm going to go with him finishing in, I'm going to say 8th place with Magnussen, and I'll get onto my reasons why later when I get onto Haas F1. Yeah, Lando Norris, I think, will finish in 7th, and then, yeah, that'll be 2 points. Alpine will score none, even if they finish 9th and 10th, they'll score none for that. And then they'll be down, to 5 points. And 5 points with, tomorrow's race and next Sunday's race in Abu Dhabi, which obviously is not sprint weekend. Very doable. Very, very doable to score the further, 6 points they would need. Or actually, no, it'd be only 5 points, would it? Because if they finish level on points, McLaren would finish ahead of Alpine, because McLaren have a better, I think, race finish. Their best race finish is 3rd, McLaren, from this season. And Alpine's is 5th, I think, from this season. So, yeah. 5 more points if they were to do that today, with Norris in 7th and the Alpines in 9th and 10th, which I think they will finish. And I'll get onto that. Reasons why I think that in a moment. But, yeah, that's what I think will happen with Lando Norris. For Daniel Ricciardo, yeah, 14th on the grid is a very bad starting position for him, because the McLaren, even though it's a bit quicker in the speed traps this weekend, as I just showed, it's still not as quick as the AlphaTauris, Williamses, and obviously some of the Alpines as well. And because he's got the 2 Alpines in the top 10, you've got Albon and Gasly as well just ahead of him on the grid. It's gonna be very hard for him to make progress, and I think Ricciardo is going to finish, in my opinion, in 15th place. The reason I think 15th is because he won't be able to overtake Gasly and Albon on track, because they're too quick down the straights, and Ricciardo's pace this weekend hasn't been that good anyway. to be honest, Ricciardo's never been that quick here, so it's not really surprised that he's not having a great weekend. And the reason I think he'll finish behind the two Aston Martins is because the Aston Martins tend to be a bit quicker in race conditions. And I know it's only 24 laps, but it is, enough laps, I think, for Aston Martin to make some progress. And we know Lance Stroll starting on, or just behind him, in 15th is Stroll. We know he always gets a great start to the race. So yeah, that's why I think Ricciardo will finish in 15th place. But yeah, if they do get the predicted finish that I think they'll get, I think they can be happy with that. Because then if they can translate that into, 6 points or 8 points in the race tomorrow, and Alpine somehow score a point or two less, then it gives them a proper chance. Not a great chance, because I still think it's in Alpine's hands, really, because they've got a better driver combination. And I still think overall they've got a better car than McLaren. But, even though it's still be in Alpine's hands, I still think it is, McLaren still give themselves, at that point, a great chance at getting 4th in the championship. And yeah, with Alpine, we'll go on to them now. So 6th and 7th on the grid. And yeah, I think they'll finish 9th and 10th. The reasons behind that is because Magnussen obviously starting on pole. And with Magnussen, he will start to drop down the grid. But the thing is, because the Alpines will also drop a bit further down the grid, because they will be overtaken by Hamilton, Perez and Leclerc behind, it will take time for Ocon and Alonso to be on the same piece of racetrack as Magnussen. Magnussen will come towards them, but because Alpine will be getting overtaken, it will take a bit further time for them to come together on track. So probably the final, 4 or 5 laps, you'll see the Alpines trying to have a go at Magnussen. But because Magnussen has had good pace so far this weekend, and because the Haas still, with its straight line speed, is pretty competitive down the straights, and we've seen this season they have been very good with their top end speed, it will be just too little too late with Alpine. And as well, because Ocon is ahead of Alonso on the grid, and Ocon is a lot less skilled, or not, let me rephrase that. He's not a lot less skilled at overtaking, but he's a lot less aggressive at overtaking, is Ocon. And because I think he'll be the highest placed Alpine driver today, I think, he won't really be able to get close enough to go for a move, even though if it was Alonso in that position, I think Alonso would make the difference and get ahead of Magnussen. But 9th and 10th on the grid for Alpine, even with McLaren, if it finishes up how I predicted to finish, with Norris finishing in 7th and grabbing those 2 points. Even if that happened, it's not the end of the world for Alpine. They've still got a very quick car. They've got a faster car down the straights. We've seen plenty of times this season Alpine have had a faster car on race day compared to McLaren. It's not the end of the world if it's 9th and 10th on the grid. And at least if it is 9th and 10th on the grid, they won't have to worry about faster cars behind them getting their way past. They won't have to worry about that process taking place. So, yeah. With Alpine, they'll be fine. They'll get both cars in the top 10, but it just won't be a great result for them. But it'll be something decent for the race tomorrow. And I think really, for Alpine in this, battle for 4th in the championship, I think the key really for Alpine is obviously delivering on the pace they've got, but just finishing the races. Because if Alonso had finished in Mexico, the gap would be still 11 points like it was going into the Mexico City Grand Prix. So, yeah, it's really, those are the key things for Alpine. They've got the car. Norris is the only driver for McLaren that can really help McLaren finish 4th in the championship. Ricciardo, I know he finished 7th in Mexico, but Ricciardo's just not consistent enough. So Alpine, again, it's in their hands. They've just got to deliver when it matters in these final 2 races. But I still have a feeling they're not going to be able to, because it's always disappointment with this team. They're still disappointing with how they've not been able to transition into a front-running team, despite putting so much money into the effort since 2016 when they were Renault. Renault are now putting even more money in, I think, from next year on. So, yeah, they always are, Alpine, a disappointing team. And as well with Alpine / Renault, since 2019, they've finished 5th every season. fifth, obviously 2019 in that battle for fourth with McLaren, funnily enough. I will say 2019 and this season, they do feel very similar. Just replace, Red Bull and Mercedes in the, positions down. It does feel very similar in how things are played out. But then 2020, they had great chance. They had a really good chance at finishing third in the championship. I know their car wasn't as quick as the Racing Point, but they had their chances, Renault. They really did that season. They just didn't deliver. And then 2021, fifth was actually a pretty good result for them considering the pace that their car had, but again, was a disappointment considering what they were like the season before. And then this season, it's been a better season for Alpine, but I still have a feeling they're going to drop to fifth, and that's why I still think McLaren are going to finish in fourth. So, yeah. Alpine, we'll see what they can do, but as I said, it's in their hands, and it's all on them to deliver. And now we'll go into the rest of the teams, and obviously Alfa Romeo, Haas, AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, Williams. And I'll try and not whiz through the teams quickly, but be a bit quicker going through these teams because there's a bit less to say with these teams, except really Haas, I would say. Obviously with Magnussen on pole. So with Alfa Romeo, 17th and 18th on the grid. Disappointing because I think in the dry they've got a much faster car. I think they've got a car that's probably like 10th or 11th on the grid if it was, a dry qualifying session yesterday. I think they've got good pace. I think it's just, with the conditions, they just didn't get good enough laps in, and their laps that they put in, the condition, they weren't, they didn't set those lap times, I think, late enough in Q1, if I remember correctly. Obviously, lots was going on in Q1. I was trying to update the order on the screen and trying to watch to see what was actually going on, so I couldn't pay massive attention to Alfa Romeo. But yeah, just at the end of the day, they didn't produce a good enough lap to get themselves into Q2. Considering the conditions, they really needed to bounce really high up into the order, but they just couldn't really improve on what they did early on the soft tyres, could Alfa Romeo. So a shame, but that's the way it played out. They will make some progress today. I think they'll get ahead of Latifi, maybe even get ahead of Ricciardo in the McLaren, but yeah, they'll probably be 15th, 16th on the grid at best for tomorrow's race. My prediction is they'll be 16th and 17th in the sprint, and obviously that means 16th and 17th for the race tomorrow, which, not a great position for them, but with a 71 lap race, a load more laps, that means that a load more laps for them to be able to maybe nick a point. So you have to remember, they are in a massive fight with Aston Martin for 6th in the championship, which is still very much in Alfa Romeo's favour, and with Aston Martin, 13th and 15th on the grid for the sprint, Alfa Romeo still looking good, but, if Aston Martin can maybe luck into some higher up positions because of retirements or whatever, then, yeah, it will be curtains then for Alfa Romeo. But, all they need to do really today is just do the best they can, get the highest position they can, and then go from there for the race tomorrow. And now we will go on to the pole sitters. Haas F1, first pole for Haas F1 in F1. They've been in Formula 1 now, 6 years? Start of 2016 is when they started in F1, so 6.5 years they've been in Formula 1. And they've had actually, despite the last few seasons, them being a bit of a laughing stock in certain aspects, not necessarily down to their on-track performance. What do you call it with Haas F1? They, I think, considering the resources they've had, the lack of money compared to other teams they've had, and their system of how they get their cars built, with Dallara helping and all of that, and the technical partnership with Ferrari they've had, I think Haas have actually had a very good time in F1, considering the circumstances they faced in F1. I mean, first season in F1, they beat Sauber and Renault and finished 8th in the championship, a very impressive first year. And then it was, 8th in 2017, was it? And then 5th in 2018. A brilliant season that year. They had really that year the the best midfield car, did Haas, but they just couldn't deliver on it in the races. But in qualifying, they were always so quick. That year, 2019, they dropped down to 9th, and then they were 9th, I think, in 2020 as well. And then obviously last year they were last, but now they're 8th. But again, because of the resources, lack of resources, and lack of money they've had compared to other teams, I think they've done very well in F1. They've worked very hard. They've got a very good crew at Haas F1. They really do give it everything to get, the results they do. And, this year they've been unlucky with, how they lost their title sponsorship. How they lost their title sponsorship with, the whole Russian invasion of Ukraine, causing that to happen. Because it really affected their ability this season to develop the car, because they've not been able this season to operate at the level of the cap to spend that extra money. Because remember, this season, they're supposed to they have had, rather, the most wind tunnel testing time available to them out of any other team. But because of that lack of sponsorship money, they've not been able to benefit from it, which is a shame. And it makes me wonder what would have happened if they had had that sponsorship money from, obviously, someone else. Next year, they've got the MoneyGram title sponsor, which will help them operate at the level of the cap. So, yeah, it's it's a bit, well, not very sad. It's a bit sad, but it's very interesting to wonder, I guess, where would Haas F1 have been if they had enough money to operate at the level of the cap? Because I think they could have been probably fighting with Alfa Romeo and be really in 6th place ahead of Alfa Romeo in the championship. Maybe even putting on a fight with McLaren and Alpine in the championship because of the amount of extra wind tunnel testing time that they've had this year. Luckily, if they finish 8th or even 9th, they will still get quite a bit of wind tunnel testing time next year to help them. But Kevin Magnussen on pole position, great effort. So happy for the guy. I've criticised him a couple times because of some poor racing incidents. And yeah, he's not the cleanest driver, which obviously the other drivers trying to overtake him today will have to look out for. Sorry, I'm just looking at, I'm watching Newcastle versus Chelsea as this stream's going on. And Newcastle have just made it 1-0. They've absolutely dominated us. They deserve it. We were playing like absolute shit. We don't deserve to get anything from this game, honestly. But yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, with Haas F1 and Kevin Magnussen, I'm so happy for Magnussen. I've always been a big fan of him because I know he's very talented. He's such a quick driver. He reminds me a lot of Valtteri Bottas, this Magnussen, where he's so quick in qualifying. Doesn't get the credit for that, as much credit for that as I think he really deserves. He got really screwed over by McLaren and Renault earlier in his career. Found a good home in Haas F1 though, and wow, what partnership they've been, Magnussen and Haas. And Magnussen, I think actually today, this is his 100th race start for the Haas team today for Haas F1. So yeah, it's going to be an emotional one for Magnussen, starting on pole for the first time. I'm sure he dreamt of it so many times in his F1 career so far, and as well, in his junior career. And really coming from the junior formulas, Magnussen, a lot was expected of Kevin Magnussen. That's why McLaren replaced Sergio Perez with him, and they really thought highly of him. And I think if they gave him more time at McLaren, I think they would have really benefited from having him because, again, he is such a quick driver and such a skilled driver. Not always the best in, again, racing situations, but he's a very, I think, good driver. But with Magnussen, yeah, great to see him on pole position. Obviously, he won't beat any of the Ferraris, Mercedes, or Red Bulls unless those cars have some sort of issues in this race, crashes with others, or reliability issues or whatever. But yeah, 7th really should be the aim in the sprint today, which I think is possible. I think it's definitely possible. I think realistically though, because Lando Norris is not too far back on the grid, now Norris in 4th and Magnussen on pole, I think because the McLaren is a lot quicker than the Haas, especially in that middle sector, which will help Norris get closer to Magnussen, make an overtake in either Sector 3 or Sector 1, that will help Lando Norris get ahead of Kevin Magnussen. But I think he will have enough pace and will, because of the amount of laps we've got, I think he will be able to keep ahead of the two Alpines. And if he did finish in 8th, that would be a single point for Magnussen and Haas. And remember, they are only 1 point clear of AlphaTauri in the championship. So it could be the point that ends up confirming them to finish in 8th place, which would be, I wouldn't say a good season for Haas, because I think they expected a lot more. And with the car they had at the start of the season, really, I thought they were going to be probably 5th or 6th in the championship this year. But obviously, because of their, money issues, development issues, it's really hampered them. But I think it would be a satisfactory season for them, finishing in 8th place, because, they've still beat, a couple teams. They've not finished in last place, and they beat a team in AlphaTauri that, last season were lapping them, and very successful AlphaTauri. So, yeah, it would be a good, or not a good, again, not a good season for Haas, but it would be a satisfactory result for them in the championship. But yeah, big hopes for Magnussen. As long as he finishes in the top 8, I think that's good enough for him. But Mick Schumacher starting last, yeah, he might beat a couple cars at the back there, but I think really his F1 career, I'm not sure it's done, but it's definitely on hold until maybe 2024 or later. So yeah, a shame for Schumacher. Just didn't deliver the laps in the end. Not sure why. Maybe Haas F1 didn't quite send him out at the right times. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's a shame really what happened there to Schumacher, and I think that's definitely the final nail in his coffin for his F1 career at Haas. Not in general, but definitely at Haas. By the way, I've got the F1 coverage on now. I can announce that it is beautiful and sunny, so no chance of rain. There are some clouds in the distance, but from looking at the weather conditions, looks as though it's going to be a dry sprint, and then probably a dry race tomorrow. Maybe we'll get some rain, would make things exciting. We've seen so many classic races here in the past with rain, but yeah, it would be nice. But we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, Magnussen, I think, will be in 8th. Schumacher, I don't know, 18th, 19th, something like that in the race today. AlphaTauri quickly. Pierre Gasly starting in P12, Yuki Tsunoda starting P19. A shame for Tsunoda because he's had a good season. Not a good season, but a good second half of the season, Tsunoda. But yeah, just didn't deliver anywhere near a good enough lap in the end, did Tsunoda, to get into Q2. And if he did get into Q2, I think he could have ended up probably just outside the top 10. You never know, maybe getting into Q3. For Pierre Gasly, a bit of a shame with Gasly, because I think in normal dry conditions where, the track isn't constantly rubbering up all the time like it was, or gripping up all the time like it was in Q2, I think Gasly's got enough pace in that AlphaTauri to be in the top 10. I don't think he will be in the top 10 in the sprint today. I think he'll finish in, I'm going to say 12th, where he's starting, because I think the Williams ahead of him, but Alex Albon is going to be very hard to overtake down the straights. And Albon driving, as we know, very, very well. But yeah, for Gasly, I think he'll start just as outside the top 10. And I think, for the race on Sunday, with Magnussen then 8th, and let's say Albon finishes in 11th, which I think he will, over that 71 lap distance, I think AlphaTauri, they've got a good chance of getting a point or two and outscoring Haas. So, it wouldn't be a disaster if Gasly finished there, but that's where I think he'll finish. I think Gasly will finish in P12. Yuki Tsunoda, I'm going to go in 17th or 18th. I'm not quite sure, but I think really most of his work will be coming tomorrow, where we'll see a bit more progress from the Japanese driver. For Aston Martin, 13th and 15th on the grid. A shame for them a bit as well, because they were looking good in qualifying up until those final runs where the rain started to come down a bit more and they just couldn't really improve enough on their final runs, and both drivers went deep at turn 1. You'll see a picture of that, I think, in a moment that clearly shows that. And yeah, they tried their best, the drivers. They were quick, but they just, were a bit unlucky with the conditions coming in the way they did at the time. Yeah, they could have done better laps earlier on, but realistically, I don't think, given what the conditions were like, I think they really did the best job they could, did Aston Martin and their drivers. So 13th and 15th it is on the grid. Now, we know Aston Martin do tend to make a lot of progress in races, but I don't think they're going to make a ton of progress in the sprint race here. If you look at the sprint races this year, Imola and what was the other one? Austria, they didn't really move massively forward from what I can remember. I think they may have moved forward, but it wasn't anything significant, or they weren't really, moving up right into the top 10. I think what we might see, I think they'll finish 13th and 14th in the sprint today, if you're wondering. I think what we might see is them probably at best finishing 12th and 13th, maybe 11th and 13th if Aston Martin really have good enough pace to get ahead of Alex Albon in the Williams, who will be, again, very hard to overtake. But I just think with the lack of laps and with the possibility as well of DRS trains, it's just going to be hard for Aston Martin to make real progress. But for tomorrow, in the race, 71-lap race, I think they've got a good chance of getting a point or two. Whether they do or not, who knows? It is difficult to say, really, how quick they are, because we haven't had enough representative dry running. But yeah, I do think they've got probably better pace than what they showed in qualifying yesterday. But yeah, don't expect too much from them, but we'll see. Probably if they do change position, it'll be maybe a move or two up the field. And finally for Williams, Alex Albon is sorry, I was just reading something in the chat there. Alex Albon is starting in P11. Great result from him. Great driving from him. He's had such a good season. And he is going to be very hard to stop today for the drivers behind in terms of his pursuit. 4 points. I mean, the drivers ahead, I think, will be, absolutely fine. I don't think there'll be any issues. I don't think Alpine or Haas or McLaren will have any issues. Let me just do something quickly, guys. I just need to put something in the bin a sec. Just hold on. So I just found a bit of food crumbs on my desk that I didn't know that was there. Yeah, I don't think it'll be a serious threat to the cars in the top 10, but for the cars behind, with the amount of laps in this race, probably just a bit too hard to get, to get past him. So P11 is where I think he'll finish, and if there's any, significant retirements in the race tomorrow, that's a good place to start, because he could then probably grab a point or two from tomorrow's Grand Prix. Nicholas Latifi starts in 16th. He had a decent effort, did Latifi, in qualifying, but just wasn't enough in the end. But he will probably, Latifi, even though it's only 24 laps, he will probably finish last or second last or something like that. So, yeah, if you are a fan of the GOAT, don't get too excited, because, it's going to be difficult for Latifi in the, normal dry conditions. Of course, if he got within a second of someone ahead, it would maybe be something interesting to look out for. But, yeah, we know he's going to drop back. But, yeah, that's Williams, and that's all the teams done for you guys. And now I will cut onto these pictures, which you'll be seeing during the watch-along itself. And, guys, the sprint race begins in 20.5 minutes' time. So keep your comments coming. Let me know what you think is going to happen. And keep voting, guys, in that poll at the top of the live chat. Who do you think is going to win the sprint race? Will it be Verstappen, Magnussen, Russell, or Sainz? Let me know in the live chat in that poll, and I will, probably in about 15 minutes time, end the poll and read the results and hear your guys' thoughts. But just want to say quickly again, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because tomorrow I'll be live at 4 PM UK time, 2 hours before the race begins, for the race watch along for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. And then from 4 till 5:30, we'll be doing the race preview. 5:30 PM UK time till 8 PM, we'll be doing the race watch along. The race starting at 6 PM UK time. And then for an hour after the race finishes, we will be doing a reaction to the Grand Prix. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for that. And subscribe for more content like this in general. And as well, don't forget to smash the like button if you haven't already, to help out the channel, because it does help the channel in its growth. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 or ChazHD if you want to keep up with the content on this channel. But talking about Twitter, I need to I need to post quickly the link back out. So let me just quickly do that. Post the link back out on my community tab and on Twitter as well. So keep your comments coming, guys. I will now, for the final 20 minutes, be reading all of your comments in the chat. So yeah, don't worry, I will get to them now. Let me just type all this out. Come join us now to watch along the sprint race for the Sao Paulo GP. And I'll just quickly post that on Twitter as well. And then we can get into your comments in the chat. So yeah, let me just do this quick. So come join us here now to watch along the sprint race for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. And I'll just quickly post some hashtags as I normally do. And then, yeah, we'll get into all of your comments in the chat. So please keep them coming. Let me just do a couple more. And actually one more. Right, there you go. Right, so that's all posted out. Let me just check something else, which is Nibs just sent me a message. Why are John Paul, George, and Ringo on the grid? Oh, it's Bernie. That's Bernie Eccleston. Bernie Eccleston's on the grid, that is. Sorry, I was just seeing that. I haven't seen Ringo on the grid unless he's saying that Bernie looks like Ringo. But yeah, there's Bernie Eccleston on the grid. You know what's funny though? It's pretty clear that's Bernie Eccleston, but they are not showing him. They're not actually focusing on him. We all know why, because F1 are like, no, let's pretend like he never existed, even though, you know, he did run F1 from what mid-80s till 2016. So yeah, bit funny there that they're just going to pretend like he doesn't exist. But he took a picture just then with Christian Horner. Obviously, Bernie lives in Brazil with his wife, so that's why he's at the Sao Paulo Grand Prix. And of course, when he ran the Brabham team in the 70s and the 80s, he had so many Brazilian drivers, if I remember, or South American drivers who raced for Brabham. Was it Carlos Reutemann, Carlos Pache, I think, as well? And there's a corner here named after Carlos Pache, or Pache, however we want to say his last name, who won here, I think, in the 70s. I can't remember what year it was exactly. Obviously, Nelson Piquet as well. So yeah, he's always had a connection to South America, has Bernie. And yeah, on the grid, milling around and chatting for the first time in a while. One thing I am going to do quickly, guys, before I read out some of your comments, is just have a quick drink before we get into the sprint race. So just give me a couple seconds. All right, so there you go. That feels good. Tell you that Simon Lazenby and Corinne Chandok are interviewing Kevin Magnussen on the grid. I think that's got to be the first time in a while that Sky have interviewed a pole position man on the grid. Because normally, normally the people on pole are, Verstappen's, Hamilton's, Leclerc's, and normally Ferrari drivers, Verstappen, Hamilton, and most of the top drivers don't tend to like to be interviewed on the grid. So it is rare that you get pole position. The man on pole position start or do interviews on the grid. It's very rare these days. But good to see. Very good to see. As they're now showing a replay of last year's sprint where Valtteri Bottas, who started second, got a great start on the inside. And then obviously he won the sprint last year, but he was already beaten into turn 1 in the race on the Sunday. And then Carlos Sainz. Did he overtake Verstappen? Oh no, he had slight contact with Verstappen, then went off, and then he had to re-overtake him. I remember now. That sprint race last year feels like it was like 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It feels so long ago, to be honest. And they're just showing a replay of Lewis Hamilton's great start to last year's sprint. Obviously, that drive, and Lewis's drive last year at this Grand Prix is one of the most memorable weekends we've had in the last few years, no doubt about it. Obviously his car was very fast, but to win the race, especially from 10th on the grid the way he did, it was just really good and really special. Anyway, with 13 minutes to go, let's get into some of your comments in the live chat. And in maybe just over 5 minutes from now, I'm gonna end the poll, and I'm going to read out the results. Hello, by the way, to Achilles Vlog says, hi Chaz, watching from Kuwait. Good to hear your voice. That's a place where I normally don't get viewers from, of course, but what do you call it? Great to see you and great to have you along. Hold on. Rooks just added me in the chat saying reposting links, ? Yeah, you're allowed to post links. Links are absolutely fine. I believe. And I think you have posted one. So, yeah. Right, let me read out some comments here. If I can. And yeah, keep letting me know what you think is going to happen in the sprint. Who do you think is going to win the sprint race, and what do you think or how do you think the top teams are going to get on today in this sprint? Let me try and find some good comments here if I can. Crystal Racing says, apparently Otmar said the bonus money given for P4 is worth more than the extra wind tunnel time given for P5. To be honest, there isn't really a big difference between finishing 4th and 5th in terms of the extra wind tunnel time that you'll get next year. It's only like a small percentage, really. Alpine, though, Otmar said on yesterday, that they believe they've took a good step forward with next year's car. Problem is it good enough? That's the problem. Because, there are other teams in the midfield that I think have got a lot more potential than what they've showed this season. McLaren, for example, McLaren's dragginess has really affected their pace this season, and if they were to completely solve that and put it, swing that completely to the other side of being, not draggy at all, but still having quite a lot of downforce, they like Red Bull do, the McLaren are going to improve a lot. The midfield team to look out for next season, though, is undoubtedly Aston Martin, because obviously they'll have a bit more wind tunnel time than McLaren and Alpine, and obviously the top 3 teams. And now they've got them like Red Bull people and I think Mercedes people at the team now, and they started back in May 2022. Now they've worked on next year's car, which by now all the teams have pretty much agreed and now got into properly building next year's car, Aston Martin really should be moving up the grid next year. And what my hope is because of that extra wind tunnel time and development time, is that next year they'll start off, say, around fourth quickest team, and then they'll be able to, by the end of the season, they'll be able to close the gap to the front three teams because of that much extra wind tunnel time that they have if they do finish, indeed, in 7th place. So look out for Aston Martin next year. It's going to be very interesting to see how they get on next year. Lab Gura says definitely Verstappen will walk away with the sprint race and then the GP. Only hope it's mechanical failure to make the race fun. Yeah, I do tend to agree, unfortunately. If we get some rain, though, could make things interesting because, if Red Bull don't get the tyre choice right or if it hits at the wrong time for Verstappen in general, yeah, it really could. It really could make things interesting. Rook says, no, that's ages ago about you reposting the stream links. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. Cheers for reminding me, though. Cheers for reminding me. Sorry, I was just confused. Stephen M says, Max is definitely going to win, but I think Kevin could get himself a really good starting position for tomorrow. Yeah, I think, I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to drop us on the top 10 because I don't think he's going to drop that quickly. But yeah, let's be realistic. He's not going to finish in the top 3, is he? Crystal Racing says Aston will be dangerous with Fernando, Peter Pan, Alonso. Yeah, as well. That's what's really great for Aston Martin next season is they've got him, a driver, Fernando Alonso, who will get the absolute best out of that car most weekends, and even in certain weekends he will be getting maybe a bit more out of the car than what was thought possible because of his own greatness. And obviously there's only so many drivers on the grid that have the talent level of Fernando Alonso. So yeah, it's going to be great for Aston Martin next season, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they get on. Let me find, what I'm going to find, a shame that I have to do this because, we've only got a few minutes to go until the sprint, and I want to keep reading your comments out in the chat. But I'm going to have to read out probably 1 or 2 final comments and then get into the stats and the grid order before we get into this race because we're not very far away now. Willif1 says Tsunoda doesn't deserve his seat. Don't understand how people have been saying he's been impressive. He hasn't. Well, those people I think have been probably a bit too excessive in their praise, but he has had a much better season than last year. And I think because of that, and he's done a lot better compared to Gasly than he did last year, we have to say that he's had a decent season, maybe a good season, you could argue. But yeah, he's had a much better season, there's no doubt about that. Final comment I'll read is from Aden. Says, I must have had a lucid dream, so I saw Leclerc, Verstappen, Perez, Sainz, Magnussen, Hamilton, Gasly, Ocon, Ricciardo, Norris, etc. Let's see. That would be, properly mental if that did happen. And let's hope in this 24-lap sprint that it does happen. But let me now quickly get on to the results of this poll. There's been 358 votes, it appears. So let me end the poll. 360 votes now in total, and let me read out the results. So the question was, who do you think will win the sprint race in Brazil? And this is what you guys answered with. You went with Verstappen, 61%, Magnussen, 22%, Russell, 10%, Sainz, 5%. Max Verstappen, I think, will win the sprint. Magnussen, I think we know he's not going to win. I know some people are probably voting for that, just hoping that they're right. To be honest, I hope he does win. It'd be great. It really would be great, especially for Haas to score 10 points, which for a team like them is massive, to score in just one session. So that would be absolutely fantastic. But yeah, thank you guys for voting. And of course, there'll be more polls during the weekend. But with 5 minutes to go until the sprint, I think it's now time we get into the final little few stats and things before the sprint begins. Let's start with some stats. Now, the stats I'm going to be showing are qualifying stats, because technically this is qualifying. So, yeah, please do remember that. So, Max Verstappen does have one pole position from Brazil from 2019. A great weekend that was for Verstappen, where he was on pole for the race and he won brilliantly as well. And he should be on pole for tomorrow as well. Verstappen has finished first in qualifying. Again, this is technically, I guess you could say, a qualifying session of sorts. 7 times in 2022. The Saturdays have not been the best days for Red Bull this season. Of course, the Sundays have been amazing. And Red Bull have taken 35% of pole positions in 2022. The only plus is that in the 2 sprint races this year, Red Bull have won both of them. So please do remember that. In the sprint races, they have done very, very well. From Ferrari now and Charles Leclerc. Leclerc's best qualifying result in Brazil is 4th from 2019. He didn't start there, though. He ended up starting 14th because of a 10-place grid penalty for a new power unit element. Ferrari's the last time they started on pole position in Brazil was in 2008 with Felipe Massa. Yes, 14 years ago in that classic race. That was the last time they started on pole for this race. It's almost like a curse at this point for Ferrari, considering what happened in that Grand Prix, where they were not robbed, of course, but where the championship for them on the driver's side was took away at the very last second. And Ferrari, they have taken 60% of pole positions in 2022. So on a Saturday, Ferrari have been, the team to look out for. And for Mercedes, let's go on to them now. Lewis Hamilton, he has been on pole in Brazil 3 times since 2012. He was on pole in 2012, his last race for McLaren, and also in 2016 and 2018 as well. And Mercedes have been on pole for every race in Brazil except for since 2014, except for 2019. So they've been very successful here. And I think Russell, if he does have an amazing start, gets ahead of Verstappen, gets ahead of Magnussen, if he can really put in some good laps and have some good pace, he could end up on pole, you never know, for the race tomorrow. Now, quickly, let's get into the championship standings. Max Verstappen, of course, the driver's champion. Sergio Perez second, only 5 points clear of Leclerc. So Perez really needs to beat Leclerc in this sprint, obviously, to keep gaining some more points on him. George Russell is 4th, with Hamilton 5th and Carlos Sainz in 6th. With Lando Norris in 7th, Ocon 8th, Alonso 9th and Bottas in 10th. And then on the constructor side, obviously Red Bull are the champions. Mercedes in 3rd, only 40 points behind Ferrari in 2nd. If Mercedes have, 2nd and 5th in this sprint, then that would be, they'd outscore Ferrari by, 3 or 4 points? And then maybe if they have a big race tomorrow, they could maybe get after Ferrari in the championship in the final race in Abu Dhabi next week. So look out for that. Alpine are 4th, 7 points clear of McLaren in 5th. A vital battle taking place today. Alfa Romeo in 6th, 4 points clear of Aston Martin in 7th. Again, another vital battle there. Haas are 1 point clear of AlphaTauri in 9th. That's another very important battle, with Williams still in 10th on 8 points. But now, let's get into the starting grid for today's 2022 Sao Paulo Grand Prix sprint race. So on the front row, it is Kevin Magnussen on pole for the first time in his career, and Haas is first ever pole, with Max Verstappen in 2nd. On the second row, it's an all-British second row of George Russell and Lando Norris. The third row, it is Carlos Sainz and Esteban Ocon. The 2 ex-teammates and 2 best friends of Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton are on the 4th row. Obviously, they clashed here massively in 2007, 15 years ago, where Alonso and Hamilton almost collided at turn 4 and Hamilton had to go off the track. 9th and 10th, it is Sergio, Perez and Leclerc, both fighting eagerly for 2nd in the championship. 11th and 12th, the 2 ex-Red Bull drivers of Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly. 13th and 14th, the 2 ex-teammates at Red Bull, Sebastian Vettel and Daniel Ricciardo. 15th and 16th, an all-Canadian row of the grid, Lance Stroll and Nicholas Latifi. The penultimate row of the grid, 2 Alfa Romeos of Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas. And the back row of the grid, Yuki Tsunoda and Mick Schumacher. But now we'll get rid of all these graphics as the sprint is going to begin in a moment. And let me just adjust that and get the order up as well. There you go on the left-hand side of your screen. And the formation lap is about to begin in just a second. And there it has begun, as Verstappen has a slight practice start there. So the formation lap is underway, guys. It should be a pretty quick formation lap. So Rook is saying Verstappen and Latifi on mediums. So I will make sure to update that quick. That's another thing, obviously. I will get the tyres on screen for who is on what compounds as early as I can. But obviously, will take a bit of time. So, right, everyone on the soft except for Verstappen and Latifi. So let me just try and do that now. Then I'll be able to have that ready. Obviously, positions will change on the first lap. So, you know, might still make things a bit difficult. So, try and do as much as I can. As Kevin Magnussen already halfway through the formation lap. And hold on, let me just go to... right, it's already like that. As Kevin Magnussen now coming into turn 11. The fast, not totally flat out left-handers. Yeah, all the tyre information I've got correct. So I'll quickly show it. Actually, hold on. Ricciardo is not on the medium. Let me just correct that. So, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, those are all of the tyres. Verstappen and Latifi on the mediums. Everyone else is on the soft compound tyre. So, they're all going to be, no pun intended, sprinting in this 24-lap race. And to be honest, the mediums, probably not right away. First few laps will be maybe a tad difficult, but as Kevin Magnussen now lines up on pole position for the first time ever. And goes slightly over his starting box, I think. What do you call it? Yeah, second half of the sprint. Verstappen's tyres will really come alive and really help him here. But they are now all getting lined up on the grid, guys, for the Sao Paulo sprint race. And the final car on the track is Mick Schumacher, as we just look at Sebastian Vettel there, line up in 13th place. And now Mick Schumacher lines up. The grid is mixed up. Let's hope we get a very exciting sprint today. As the lights come on, it is 3 lights, 4 lights, 5 lights in Sao Paulo. And lights out and away we go. And Kevin Magnussen gets a great start, and so does George Russell. Is he going to go around the outside? No, he doesn't, because Verstappen holds him back. Lots of locking up, but thankfully everyone gets through just about okay. The Alpines having a look on Carlos Sainz. Now Carlos Sainz having a look around the outside of Lando Norris. It's turn 4, and the Alpines almost colliding. Oh, Fernando Alonso getting all out of shape. That was very close. The two Aston Martins side by side. Daniel Ricciardo's had a good start. Looks as though he's gained 3 or 4 positions as they all pile through now. Perez has got Leclerc all over him. Leclerc going round the outside. Will he go down the inside for the next corner? No, I don't think he will, as everyone's still side by side. And, yeah, absolutely mental action going on. Now, Ricciardo is I don't know if he's being overtaken or he's trying to overtake an Aston Martin there, as Latifi has dropped a position. And, yeah, Ricciardo trying to have a look there, as Verstappen nowhere near Magnussen, and George Russell all over the back of Verstappen coming down to turn 1. Surely Russell will go for the move. Verstappen defends late to the inside and forces Max to have a bad exit. And now Russell gets a very good exit. Why are we not seeing it, Mr. Director? Why are we not seeing Russell versus Verstappen? Here we go, down to turn 4. And Verstappen keeps the second position. And Russell's now going to go down the inside of turn 5 even as he's all over him, harrying him the whole way through. Let me just quickly update some of the order as they now enter the middle sector. Sainz is up to 4th. Hamilton is 7th now. Perez is 8th. Alonso, I hope he's not got a problem because he's now 10th. Pierre Gasly is 11th. And then Stroll is in P12 with Vettel 13th. And then Ricciardo 14th. Albon 15th. Schumacher has had an amazing start. He's up to 16th place. As Magnussen only half a second ahead of Verstappen, by the way. Will Verstappen go for the move into turn 1? I think he will as Hamilton passes Ocon there. And yes, Max Verstappen has overtaken Kevin Magnussen. Thanks, Mr. Director, for not even showing us the change of the lead as they show Hamilton passing Ocon for 6th. So we're on lap 3 now, and Max Verstappen leads the sprint. From Magnussen 2nd, and Russell in 3rd. Let me just quickly do the tyres down. They're going to show a replay now. And Verstappen, just centered down the inside. Magnussen did not defend because he knows that the Red Bull is just way too quick. So Lewis Hamilton up to 6th. And Alonso's pitted. He must have had some sort of damage. He's pitted and he's 20th now. Alonso, what a disaster. Such an unlucky driver is Fernando Alonso. And he is down to 20th position as DRS is now enabled. So is now Gasly 10th, Stroll 11th, Vettel 12th, Ricciardo 13th, and then Albon, Schumacher, Latifi, Tsunoda up to 17th. As George Russell now goes round the outside of Magnussen up to 2nd on now lap 4 out of 24. And then, Tsunoda 17th, Zhou 18th, Bottas 19th, Alonso 20th. Alonso is obviously going to finish there. As it is now lap 4 out of 24. And here comes Carlos Sainz on Magnussen down the inside at turn 4. Magnussen just lets him go because he knows there's no point fighting it. So Magnussen now 4th. Thankfully, Lando Norris has got the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton behind to worry about for now. But it's lap 4 and all the tyres on your screen are all correct and all positions are correct. And here's a replay. And either he picked up a puncture on the exit or he got hit beforehand, maybe by Hamilton. I think he probably picked up some sort of puncture. Yeah, he did. You could see it. His car was a bit down on one side. And he says, I lost the front wing. Oh, dear. He says, I lost the front wing thanks to our friend. He took the front wing of his car off on the back of his teammate into turn 1 on the 2nd lap. As Russell does the fastest lap of the race and is only 7/10 of a second behind as Lewis Hamilton overtakes Lando Norris. That, after seeing another replay of that, that looked more like Alonso just failed to pull out the slipstream quick enough. I've got to be honest. But wow, didn't know that happened. We didn't see any of that. As Mick Schumacher's now up to 14th. What a sprint he is having. And that pushes Albon to 15th. As now we're looking at Ocon versus Leclerc. Perez has now passed Ocon. I've got to say, Leclerc has not had a good sprint so far. And Leclerc now all over the back of Ocon. I just saw someone say, can you recap the start? Well, at the start of the race, Magnussen kept ahead of Verstappen and Russell. Russell tried on the first couple laps. As Alonso saying, he pushed me in turn 4 and then fully in the straight. Well done. He is so angry, is Alonso. As here comes Lewis Hamilton overtaking Kevin Magnussen for 4th. And wow, Hamilton's got some pace, hasn't he? Already 4th, and it's only lap 6 out of 24. Looking good. As Max Verstappen is only 9/10 of a second clear of Russell, who continues to have DRS. The problem for Russell is Max's tyres, they're still not quite there yet, but as we get more into this sprint, his medium tyres will start to be the better tyre. So, yeah, he's in a bit of trouble. As is a replay of Sainz passing Norris, and that's how he passed him. Norris went deep at turn 1, and then Sainz just sailed around the outside for turn 2. Good move there from the Spaniard, and Sainz has had a good start as well. And then is a replay of Sainz sending it then on Kevin Magnussen down the inside at turn 4. And yeah, Magnussen saw him there and just thought, let's let him go, get on with our race. Because Magnussen, all he needs to do is focus on beating Lando Norris. Talking of Lando Norris, he's now got Sergio Perez all over the back of him for 6th. As we're now on lap 7 and Verstappen leading by 0.8 of a second over Russell. Carlos Sainz also has the does he have DRS? No, he's 1.3 seconds behind Russell in second. Now 1.4 is Esteban Ocon has had some sort of issue. He's now down to P10 is Ocon. Maybe he's got a slow puncture after that contact. As funnily enough, Sky F1 have access to the pit wall of Alpine, which I'm sure they are smashing their heads into their desk. Because they're now currently 10th and 20th, with Lando Norris currently in 6th, and Norris probably heading for a 7th or an 8th here. This is not what Alpine needed in this sprint, as Perez all over the back of Norris and Magnussen. The problem for Perez now is Norris has got DRS from the back of Magnussen, so unless Perez can get a great run out of Jinsao, turn 12, the final proper corner, I don't know if he's going to be able to get close enough. Has he got a good exit that time? Yeah, he has, but is it enough? We have seen the McLaren has been quicker down the straights this weekend, and here we go, down to turn 1. Will Perez send it? Yes, he will, and Norris lets him go. The Perez is up to 6th. Russell, by the way, still only 8 or 7 tenths behind Verstappen on now lap 8. Latifi is now 19th for some reason. He's obviously made some sort of mistakes. He's lost 3 positions there. And yeah, the rest of the positions are as they are. So let me just correct that Tsunoda is not on the medium compound. He is on the soft. And then Latifi at the very bottom, or not the very bottom, second bottom is on the medium. And yeah, that's a replay of Gasly passing Ocon. Also the 2 Aston Martins racing side by side. Stroll, though, has kept ahead of the 4 times world champion, Sebastian Vettel. Vettel, of course, has won, as Russell saying, track limits at turn 4. Obviously wants Verstappen to rack up penalties, maybe, as we're on lap 9. And Sergio Perez now overtakes Kevin Magnussen. So Perez up to 5th. And Perez has now got 2.6 seconds ahead of him to eat into to get to Lewis Hamilton. Hamilton currently 2.6 behind Sainz. Sainz 1.5 behind Russell. Russell 1.2 behind Verstappen. Is here is Sebastian Vettel all over the back of his teammate. Oh, Stroll, what are you doing? That is horrible driving from Stroll. Absolutely horrible. Throw the fucking book at him. What a disgrace. Soon Vettel was right behind him as they came out on the exit at turn 3. And then as soon as Vettel moved out the slipstream, Stroll moved across. That is seriously naughty. He's got to get some sort of penalty for that. That is not good enough. As Vettel says, okay. Yeah, that is poor. That's so poor from Stroll. Literally 3 weeks ago, he did the same to Alonso, and we saw what that ended with. That lucky didn't send Vettel into where the marshals were. Shocking driving from Stroll. As Vettel now is going to have another go. And Stroll, yeah, not going to fight this time. And good. But Ricciardo's now all over the back. And looking to maybe make a move. But doesn't decide to. And Aston Martin probably telling Stroll, let him go. And stop being an absolute fucking idiot. Which he is. Zhou Guanyu is up to 16th. Ahead of Yuki Tsunoda now. And the rest of the order is as it is. Charles Leclerc is the next man to look out for, because Leclerc is just about a second behind Norris, and then Norris about 1.2 seconds behind Magnussen. Lewis Hamilton, by the way, has took half a second in the last, I think, 2 or 3 laps, or nearly half a second out of Carlos Sainz's lead over him for third. Hamilton is catching. And also, there is now a train all behind Esteban Ocon, who must have some sort of damage to his car because he's very slow at the minute. As now Lance Stroll has got Ricciardo all over the back of him for 12th position. Ricciardo, great exit from Jinsao. They've noted that incident in Vettel and Stroll. Surely they'll give Stroll a grid penalty for the race. And Ricciardo gets the overtake done as Sebastian Vettel overtakes Esteban Ocon. And Ricciardo, yes, confirms his move on Stroll. So Vettel up to 10th, Ricciardo up to 12th. There's Leclerc still in 8th place. Ferrari, I think their lack of race pace is really starting to show, because he should be flying past these cars. And he's, you know, we're halfway through the sprint now, and he still hasn't cleared all those midfield runners. So he's got to do it on this end of this lap, as Max Verstappen should be beginning lap 12 soon. As Russell is all over the back of Verstappen. Please show that on screen right now. They are showing it, but they need to show it on full screen, because Russell is probably going to have a move, or go for a move on Max Verstappen down to turn 1, is he? Here they come. Russell. Oh, Verstappen moves a bit late there. I'm not sure how close that was. But we're on lap 12 now, and Max massively under pressure from George Russell as they come out of turn 3. Verstappen defends to the inside, and Russell, will he go round the outside? Verstappen forces his way back up the inside for turn 4. Great racing between these two. These two are probably going to dominate the next era of Formula 1. Two amazingly good drivers, great racing, and the battle shall continue. Max Verstappen holds on, but how long can he hold on for? Because those soft tyres are working really well. I thought the mediums would really start to kick in now, but they're just not kicking in. So Verstappen keeps ahead. And Norris has now lost out to Leclerc. Leclerc should overtake Magnussen in the next lap and a half, 2 laps. As Lewis Hamilton now, he was 2.1 behind Sainz, now 1.3. And Sainz is only 1.5 seconds behind this battle. If Verstappen holds Russell up here for long enough, you're going to get a 4-way fight for the win of the sprint. As we're about to begin, lap 13. Will Russell go for the move this time? He's got to at least force Verstappen to defend, and he does. Will Russell go right around the outside? Nope, he's going to have to take his front wing away, but Max goes a bit wide through turn 2. And into turn 3, he's all over the back of him again, gets in the slipstream, pulls to the outside. Does he get the move done this time? Does Verstappen force his way back? Yes, he does. And Russell, does he get back on the exit? Yes, he does, but Verstappen still keeping his foot in it, and he's going to keep ahead of Russell up to turn 6. I know I've said before, I've not liked the sprint as there's a yellow flag for someone. I know I've said before I've not liked the sprint, but this is some absolutely brilliant stuff, I have to say. As Alex Albon is dropping down, I'm not sure what's happened. I think he may have stopped. He has. He's stopped at turn 2. And, yeah, he is out of the race now. Will that cause a virtual safety car? You'd think so. But we'll see. That's a shame for Albon because he's had a good weekend so far. But still just a yellow flag for now. Now a green flag. And Russell nowhere near close this time. As Sainz now only 8 tenths behind Russell, and Hamilton only just a second behind Sainz. So we've got a 4-way fight for the win of the sprint. Again, like I said, I normally, you know my opinions on the sprint, but this, like I said, is brilliant stuff. This is pretty much what the sprint was intended to be, as Ricciardo has passed Ocon. Brilliant for McLaren, that is. Both McLarens now ahead of both Alpines. Exactly what was needed. By the way, big shout out to Gasly in 9th, doing a great job for AlphaTauri. So, let me just update that Latifi is on the medium, not Alonso. Alonso's on the soft. Alonso, by the way, in a moment, he's only 2 seconds behind Latifi, is Alonso, so he will actually gain a position. That'll probably be the only position, though, he does gain, as Russell all over the back of Verstappen on the exo Junsao. And surely he's going to go for it again into turn 1. As they're about to begin lap 15. And here comes George Russell. And he's forced Verstappen to defend to the inside once again. Verstappen going to have the slower exit. Russell gets a great exit. Russell's got to try here and do something different to what he's done before, because Max is just doing the same thing over and over again. As Max again defends to the inside down to turn 4, but Russell gets ahead this time. And George Russell, Mr. Saturday, they don't call him Mr. Saturday for nothing. He is into the lead of the sprint. And Hamilton now only 2 tenths of a second behind Carlos Sainz. Russell into the lead, and given his pace, he really should just pull away now from Verstappen. I think this time he just had too much pace. And that's why I think he got ahead of Verstappen. He stayed in the slipstream for a bit longer than he did the previous couple times and got the move done. Now he should, like I said, be able to pull away. And as it stands, he will be on pole position for the 2nd time in his F1 career. As now we look at Lewis Hamilton all over the back of Carlos Sainz. Surely Hamilton goes for the move here to turn 1. Sainz has got to really defend now. And he does. And Hamilton, he's going to wait. He's going to try and force Sainz going a bit wide and get a better exit from turn 2. Both of these two, by the way, not too far behind Max Verstappen still. So Verstappen still not totally safe. As Hamilton now DRS down to turn 4. Sainz defends aggressively to the inside and keeps Hamilton at bay. What about on the exit? No, nothing going there, but he will have a good slipstream up to turn 6. Hamilton, will he go for a move here? Yes, no. Oh, I thought he was going to go for the move there down the inside, but he didn't. Yeah, Esteban Ocon, by the way, guys, surely has a problem. He's now 15th, is Esteban Ocon. So you've got Stroll now 12th, Schumacher 13th, Zhou 14th. Schumacher is right behind Stroll as well. Schumacher's had a brilliant sprint here as well. Haas having a brilliant sprint, because Magnussen is now 7th. Sorry that I didn't update that in time, because I was concentrating on other things. But Magnussen, 1.5 seconds clear of Norris, having a great Grand Prix. As Hamilton's a bit further back on this lap, but both of these drivers have also closed the gap to Verstappen ahead by a couple tenths on this occasion. But lap 17 it is out of 24. And 10-second time penalty for Stroll for a dangerous manoeuvre. And Verstappen has been given a first warning for track limit violations at turn 4, just so you guys know. The Stroll, he'll probably drop, as Alonso's up to 18th now. Stroll will probably drop to 18th or 19th by the end of the sprint. And he deserves it. What he did was horrendous. Poor, very poor driving from Stroll. Needs to, improve on that. Really does. Because one day, it might end in disaster. As here is Mick Schumacher all over the back of Stroll for 12th. We're now seeing on the exit turn 4 and 5. And yeah, Schumacher really should be making a move here. He's looking a lot quicker than Stroll at the moment, Stroll's 1.7 behind Ricciardo. As Schumacher exiting turn 8, turn 9, I think that was. And Stroll, quite a wide line for Stroll through turn 10, where Hamilton and Albon collided in 2019. And here's a further replay of Stroll and Vettel, and yeah, just dangerous manoeuvre there, as they said, the FIA. And he clearly deserved the penalty. Someone needs to have a word with him, like I said, because one day that could, I don't want to, don't want to tempt fate, but one day if he does that, keeps doing that, it's going to end in disaster. So he needs to get with it because it's not good enough at all. As now Verstappen has Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton all over him. Sainz only 6-7 tenths behind, Hamilton right behind Sainz as well. Verstappen could drop to 4th here. Not what he had in mind. Obviously Sainz has a 5-place penalty for tomorrow's race. So he's got to do the best he can to limit the damage, and I think he's got a great exit from Sao. And here comes Carlos Sainz on the beginning of lap 19. And Verstappen defends late, but Sainz down the inside and goes a bit deep and thankfully does not make contact with Verstappen. And Carlos Sainz is up to 2nd place. And now Lewis Hamilton right in the slipstream with DRS on Verstappen. Verstappen is going to be very keen to make sure Hamilton doesn't get ahead of him after last year. But Hamilton on the exit, very close with Verstappen. Will he go round the outside into turn 6? No, Verstappen squeezes him out. Good, hard, fair racing between the two titans, as we know, Hamilton and Verstappen. But Hamilton surely is going to pass Verstappen here. Verstappen under so much pressure, and even forcing Max to defend into turn 9. He's all over Verstappen. Mercedes have got such a quick car. Will he go round the outside of Verstappen in turn 11? No. That's a bit ambitious. But surely... Oh, Hamilton's had a bit of a wide run there through Sao, but an amazing exit. And surely... this is him getting the move done on Verstappen. I don't think Verstappen can really defend with anything with 5 full laps to go now. And Hamilton round the outside. And he's ahead. Lewis Hamilton up to 3rd. Verstappen in 4th on the medium. And the medium tyre is why Verstappen is struggling. And Sergio Perez now starting to catch quite quickly. Well, we know what tyres Red Bull are going to be running in tomorrow's race on the first stint, because this has been a bad decision. And let me just update that we are on lap 20 out of 24. We've got, 4.5 laps or so to go. And yeah, Mercedes are so quick today, as Lando Norris has passed Kevin Magnussen. Starting procedure will be investigated after the race. No idea what that's for. I didn't see anything wrong with that. I didn't see anything wrong with the starting procedure, so no idea what's happened, unless they've made their own mistake. But, yep, Norris up to 7th. Critical for McLaren. That's going to be 2 points for them. 2 points closer to 4th in the championship, as we're on lap 21. And now we're looking at Lance Stroll. Oh no, this is Sebastian Vettel all over Gasly for 9th. Aston Martin really are pretty quick this weekend. I was going to say quickly though, yeah, Mercedes are so quick. They've got the quickest car out there. Hamilton really should be now all over the back of Sainz, as Vettel all over the back of Gasly down to turn 1. And great dummy move down the inside. And the 4-time world champion is up tonight, and also the 3-time winner here in Brazil in 2010, 2013 and 2017 is up tonight in his final weekend at Interlagos. Obviously fond memories. This is where he won his 3rd world championship, and great to see him having a great Grand Prix. And yeah, Vettel up then. I noticed that the drivers hit something. I hope it wasn't an animal or a bird or something, but might have just been some debris on the track. So now lap 22. 3 full laps to go, guys, of the sprint. Remember, guys, as well, make sure to stick around until the end of the stream, because I am going to be doing at least a 30-minute reaction with you guys to what's happened in this sprint race. So make sure to stick around, because I've still got plenty to go through in this stream. As Hamilton, 1.3 seconds behind Sainz with 2.5 laps to go. Can he do it? Really needs to get under a second by the end of this lap to Sainz to be able to do it. And currently, guys, Russell heading for 8 points. Sainz heading for 7. And then Hamilton 6, Verstappen 5, Perez 4, Leclerc 3, Norris 2, Magnussen 1. Mercedes currently heading for 14 points. Ferrari heading for 10. So the gap would come down to 36 points between Mercedes and Ferrari. And maybe, with this type of pace, Mercedes might win the race tomorrow. And really get after Ferrari in the championship. But Hamilton, unfortunately, has lost time on this lap as Ocon has dropped to 17th now. What a disaster for Alpine. They will want this race to end very quickly. And guess who is right behind him now? Only 1.5 seconds behind. It is indeed Fernando Alonso. And I'm sure, as Perez says, I'm going to have to lose positions or something. I didn't quite see what that was about as went on the penultimate lap. Yeah, Alonso now has got his best friend ahead of him. Now he's only 0.8 of a second. I'm sure Alonso will let him know exactly what he thinks of him as he overtakes. Ocon definitely has damage to his car. There's no doubt about it. There's no reason Alpine should be that slow. And Perez has gained a lot on Verstappen. He's only 1.9 seconds behind now. But I think Red Bull, I think they should keep it as it is. Because, I mean, we've only got, 1.25 laps left. And, you know, Max is, quicker, really, than Perez in normal conditions. The reason, obviously, he's not quicker now is because he's on the wrong tyre. That's why Latifi's in last as well. And a pit stop behind everybody else. As Alonso has overtaken Ocon now. As we're now on the final lap, guys, of the sprint. And Hamilton now just 0.8 of a second behind Sainz. So maybe, you never know, we could get a photo finish. But it looks as though Sainz is going to hold on to second. But, guys, we are currently heading for a Mercedes front row lockout for tomorrow's race. God, that feels a long time ago since we had that. It was Saudi Arabia last year, the last time we had a front row lockout for the Mercedes team. And well, if they keep this pace up tomorrow, could very well be that first win of the season. Alonso is up to 17th. And everything else is as it is. As they come towards the end of the race now. And George Russell coming into Jinsao and exiting. He's already exited that corner as they're still watching Hamilton and Carlos Sainz. I don't think there's going to be any overtake here as Russell now coming to the line. What a drive from Mr. Saturday. And he comes to the line now to win the sprint race. A brilliant drive, proving just how great of a driver he is. As Carlos Sainz finishes second with Lewis Hamilton third. Max Verstappen will finish 4th, Perez 5th, Leclerc will finish in 6th, and then it will be Norris in 7th, Magnussen 8th, Vettel 9th, Gasly 10th, and then Ricciardo 11th. Stroll will probably drop to 18th, I'd imagine. We'll have to see. And yeah, Magnussen does finish in 8th, as they're showing him on the screen now. At least he got a point for his team. That's vital for them. So, yeah, that's brilliant. And Ocon, has ended up in 18th. Not sure where Lance Stroll is going to end up yet, so I'm just waiting to see. Stroll has been relegated to 17th position. So, yeah, so Ricciardo 11th, Schumacher 12th. What a sprint race for him. Big shout out to Mick Schumacher. Zhou 13th, Bottas 14th, and Alonso 15th, Tsunoda 16th, Stroll 17th, Ocon 18th, Latifi 19th, Albon 20th, the only retirement. By the way, great recovery from Alonso to get to 15th, despite a pit stop. So shows how quick he would have been by the contact, which we'll get into later, whether, you know, it was his fault or not. But great from Mercedes. That was excellent. Their pace came out of nowhere, really. I mean, I thought the soft tyres for the first few laps would be the better tyre, but I didn't expect Mercedes to be clearly the fastest team today. And Mercedes, because of Carlos Sainz's penalty, Carlos Sainz will now line up in P7 for the race tomorrow. That means it will be a Mercedes front row with Russell on pole, Hamilton second, with Verstappen third, Perez fourth, Leclerc fifth, Norris sixth, and then Carlos Sainz in P7. So, yeah, brilliant from Mercedes and from Russell. And now, guys, it is time for the reaction to the sprint race. So let me know in the chat, guys, what did you think of the sprint race? What would you rate it out of 10? And let me know your driver of the day. But what I'm going to do for the first time, I'm going to do it from now on, is I am going to do a poll in the chat asking you guys who you think the driver of the day is. I'm going to put 4 options. That's the only options I can do. So try and let me know in this poll, who do you think the driver of the day is? And if there is any driver of the day that you want to vote for, but it's not in the actual poll, just put it in the chat and I'll read it out. So don't worry about that. So, who is driver of the day for the F1 sprint in Brazil? I'll just put the options. Now, the options are going to be Russell, Hamilton, who else? I'm going to go with Vettel and Schumacher as the other ones. Because I think, you know, Vettel from 13th to 9th and then Schumacher from last to 12th is a great effort. So, but yeah, if you want to vote for anyone else who isn't, you know, if you want to vote for anyone else who isn't in that vote, in that poll, then make sure to put it in the live chat. And also let me know, what did you rate that sprint race out of 10? That was great. That for me was like an 8 out of 10. That was a really great sprint race. And if we're going to have sprint races, that's what it needs to be. Because that was a proper sprint and a proper exciting race. It reminds me of an F2 race, honestly. So that's the benchmark for what a sprint needs to be from now on. But yeah, let me know what you think of that in the chat. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to post the link out for the stream a couple times. And then we'll get into what your reaction is, guys, in the chat. So keep it coming. And I will make sure to read out as many comments as I can for the next, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes or so. Let me just post this out. Come join us here for instant reaction to the sprint race for obviously the Sao Paulo GP, and I'll just quickly post it out on Twitter. And as well, if you want to let me know what you thought of the Alonso and Ocon incident and the Stroll-Vettel incident, let me know about that as well if you want. The Ocon-Alonso thing, the replay I saw, we only saw it once. It looked more like Alonso just not pulling out the slipstream quick enough. Kind of like what Raikkonen did at in Portugal last year with Giovinazzi, sorry. But let me know in the chat what you think of that. Come join us now for instant reaction to the sprint race for the Sao Paulo GP, and I'll just quickly do a few hashtags. And yeah, make sure as well, everyone that's here, make sure to vote on that poll at the top of the live chat. Make sure to keep voting if you have not. Because, yeah, I'm only going to be running that poll for the next, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. Yeah, make sure to do that. Let me just do a couple more hashtags if I can. Right, so there you go. And that's all now posted out. Sorry, just reading some what do you call it? Reading some stuff on Twitter. Right. Let's now get to what you guys have to say in the chat. So, Turbo says, with Red Bull having a ton of data now on the medium, I have a bad feeling they are going to curb stomp everyone tomorrow. Your thoughts, Chazza? Well, they've got the data now on the medium to show that the medium is not the tyre to be on. I know tomorrow, obviously, the weather conditions are probably going to be a bit different. They might not be as warm, might be a bit more overcasty. Thing is, though, if they're more overcasty, it's going to be favouring the soft tyre even more then. I remember in the sprint last year, the medium tyre wasn't great for the first, I don't know, 7-8 laps, but after that, it was the much better tyre than the soft. Today, the soft was the better tyre than the medium. That's clear to see. So, I expect Max Verstappen will be starting on the soft. I think everyone will be starting on the soft compound tyre tomorrow. Yeah, after the data clearly shown today, I don't see why you would start on medium tyres or hard tyres. I think we're probably going to see them going from soft to medium. I have noticed that the tyres this year, they don't wear out as much as they did last year. Yeah, I wouldn't say the tyres wear out as much as they did last year. And a track like this, which, I mean, you know, it does wear the tyres out in certain corners, but really, you know, a lot of the track, you've got slow, medium speed corners and just long straights. There's no, like, you know, long, high speed corners that put lots of load to the tyres. And as well, the temperatures in Sao Paulo are warm, but they're not, you know, scorching hot. It's not like we see in Spain or France in the summer, or like we saw this summer just gone. So, yeah, Rook saying the track temperature dropped throughout the session, 37 down to 33. Yeah, 33 degrees Celsius track temperature sounds a lot, but for the cars, it's not actually that high. We've seen way higher, so that's helped as well. I just want to quickly look at what the weather is for tomorrow. Looks like it's going to be dry tomorrow. Yeah, looks like it's going to be dry. Let me just look at the actual radar. Yeah, it's going to be dry tomorrow. There's no rain about, really. There's not going to be any rain hitting Sao Paulo probably until Monday, to be honest. So, yeah, it's going to be a dry race tomorrow. Probably similar conditions from what I just saw on the weather there. So, yeah, everyone is going to start the soft tyre tomorrow. There's no doubt about that. By the way, Chris Medland tweeted out 15 minutes ago, I think during the sprint. You remember when I said the starting procedure will be investigated after the sprint? Lewis Hamilton is one of those under investigation. No idea what for. Hamilton, Ricciardo, and Zhou noted for a starting procedure infringement. No idea. Absolutely no idea. We haven't seen anything from the race or on the broadcast yet that could suggest what actually they did. So, yeah. I guess we'll see later this evening, but obviously I'm not going to stay around waiting forever. Let me find some other comments. Eric says, does this count as an end to Red Bull podium streak, which has been going on since the second race of the year? I'm not sure podiums count from the sprint count towards the actual podium statistics. But, you know, if you want to say it does count, then yeah, you could say it does. Yeah, it's the first time they've not finished in the top 3 of a sprint or a Grand Prix since the 2021 Italian Grand Prix, I think it was. Yeah, where Verstappen retired after colliding with Hamilton and Perez finished in 4th. No, Perez finished 6th in that race, I remember. Anders Ericsson, who gets points in the sprint race. So Russell has scored 8 points, I believe. By the way, he did get the fastest lap, but I don't believe the fastest lap point applies in the sprint. And then Sainz scores 7, Hamilton 6, Verstappen 5, Perez 4, Leclerc 3, Norris 2, Magnussen 1. So there's no changes of position in the championship, drivers or constructors, but McLaren are closer to Alpine, Haas are further away from AlphaTauri. Russell has closed the gap to Perez and Leclerc slightly and might do it a lot more tomorrow. Perez has pulled away by a point from Leclerc. And Carlos Sainz has closed the gap to Hamilton ahead of him by a point. But yeah, there's nothing really that's changed in the championship that much. So yeah, it's absolutely fine. Championship-wise. Yes, Turbo saying last year's sprint races weren't included in podium tallies. Classic Looney says, last week I said Merc are now faster than Ferrari and Chaz disagree. Do you see that in the races Merc are fast and you cannot blame tyre deg anymore for Ferrari being slower? Did I disagree or did I can't remember. Well, I'd like to know what I said in response to what you said, because I've pretty much been consistent in the last few races at least that Mercedes have been faster in the races than Ferrari have. Definitely in the second half of the season. But in qualifying, Ferrari have been still quicker than the Mercedes have. So, but in the races, yeah, Mercedes are quicker. And even though you said in the comment there, you can't just put it down to tyre deg, that's what it's down to. Ferrari wear their tyres out more than Mercedes do. Mercedes are able to keep their tyres from overheating and able to keep them in good condition for a lot longer than Ferrari, and tad longer than Red Bull as well. So that is the main reason why Ferrari are so slow on race day, or not on race day, but in races, compared to Mercedes. So it is down to tyre deg, also down to, well, still to do with tyres, but it's also down to Mercedes are able to keep their tyres from overheating. Ferrari do suffer with overheating tyres quite a bit. That's why they did lack some pace today to be able to win the sprint. But yeah, Mercedes are faster in the races. There's no doubt about that. So I don't know exactly the context of, you know, what I said at the time, to be honest. Let's find some of the comments here if I can. George is such a good driver and I don't get all this hate. By far the best young driver in F1. Right now, apart from Max, if he counts as one. Nah, Max doesn't count as one anymore, I don't think. As Max is now, what, 25 years old? So, yeah. I'd say, yeah, out of the young drivers, yeah, Russell, I would say, is the best. People will definitely throw up Lando Norris as, you know, as a contender for that. But the problem is, it's so hard to compare Russell and Norris because in their F1 careers, they've not been in cars at all similar to each other. So, yeah, we're going to have to wait until later in, you know, their F1 careers to really know. But, from what I've seen so far, I would tend to favour Russell over Norris. And also, I do also with F2, and when they were both in F2 in 2018, and Russell finished, won the championship, and Norris finished in second or third, I think it was. I think that does also, count as relevant data as to, who is the better young driver. Let me just... How old is Charles Leclerc? Does he count as a young driver as well? Let me just look. Also, I want to read out a tweet from Niblo, my co-commentator, because he's had something interesting to say on Twitter that I want you guys to hear. Leclerc's 25 as well, so yeah, I wouldn't say Leclerc's a young driver anymore. Did something happen to the Alpines? They were very fast in it. FP2, says Martin Jones. The problem with FP2 is it's not relevant, that session, because teams are basically trying to find out, what the pace is like on the, certain tyres, but they're not just looking towards the race, the sprint race rather, with that session. They're also looking towards the actual race on the Sunday with that, with what they do data-wise in FP2. So, yeah, I think the reason Alpine had what they had was Alonso obviously had his contact, not his front wing off. From what I have seen, Alonso, I think, was just clumsy in the way he just didn't pull out the slipstream quick enough. I don't think Ocon did anything wrong. And then Ocon clearly, from that, had some damage to his diffuser or something and ended up dropping back. So, yeah. Definitely a bad day for Alpine. Let me find some other comments here if I can. Shalom says, disappointed with Charles' pace. I think that's down to Ferrari, really. I don't think it's down to Charles. Let me find some other comments. Blue says 8.7 out of 10 for the sprint. 9 out of 10 from A Bridges. Good to see you, by the way, in chat. Crystal Racing says 8 out of 10. Russell driver of the day. Great race. Yeah, make sure, guys, if you've just joined, make sure to vote in that poll at the top of the chat. Who is your driver of the day for the sprint? Is it Russell, Hamilton, Schumacher, or Vettel? Let me know in that poll, because I will be ending the poll probably in 10 minutes' time. Mickey says it's never Alonso's fault, says Alonso. Yeah. When he has contact with someone, he does get very angry. He's a very hot-headed person, even at 40 years old. Flying Berserker says, did Verstappen get caught Alonso debris to be overtaken by Russell, or Mercedes pace better? It was better. I mean, he hit that debris, whatever it was, after Russell and Sainz had passed him. So it was because the medium tyre was just a horrible tyre. That's why Latifi dropped down from 16th to 19th. Another thing that didn't help with the mediums is because obviously, the sprint race started at what? 5:30 local time, 5:30 p.m. Obviously, towards that time of day, even with the sun out, the temperature really starts to drop. The race tomorrow starts an hour and a half earlier than the sprint does. So if it's the same type of weather, the mediums might be a bit more... it might be a bit more suited, I guess, for the medium tyres. Because the medium tyres do work a lot better than the soft tyres in hotter conditions. But the thing is still, will it be hot enough for the mediums to actually fire up this time? I think Red Bull, because they're now, third on the grid and third and fourth, I don't think they're going to take the risk of starting on the medium. I think they're going to start on the soft tomorrow. I think everyone will. Maybe you'll get Albon start on the medium just to, take a risk, but I don't think Red Bull will start on the medium. Turbo says Mercedes pace was better, but Verstappen was on medium. One thing to find out, really, is, or what we need to find out is, what was Perez's pace like during, the sprint? Because obviously he was on the soft compound tyre. As well, I'm just seeing a video on Twitter. One of the Alpines caught on fire, quite massively on fire, after the race had finished. So, wow, disaster for Alpine. Massive disaster for them. And as well, it's been reported that, even though, this is nothing to do with the sprint, been reported that Daniel Ricciardo is set to become Red Bull's reserve driver. So I'll keep an eye on any news about that. Right. Yeah, I was going to talk about Nib's tweet. So let me just quickly read out what he had to say. He said, in regards to the sprint, people have forgotten that there was a sprint race at Brazil last year, haven't they? Today, the difference was the new regs. Hopefully, F1 learn and use the top 6 tracks for overtaking if they want sprint races to continue, but because despite hating sprint races, that was quite enjoyable. It's true. If you're going to do sprint races at only 6 per season, and next season we've got, well, at the moment, 24 races, probably 23, because the Chinese Grand Prix is probably not going to happen because of their zero COVID policies and all of that. Yeah, pick the 6 best tracks. Don't just pick, Monaco, Singapore, even Imola. I mean, the Imola sprint race wasn't too bad, but what do you call it? It's still a hard track to overtake at, even with that long pit straight. It's still a hard track to overtake at. So, yeah, it's really not, a good idea to be holding sprint races at circuits where overtaking isn't very possible. If you're going to do sprint races, I would do a sprint race for Bahrain. I know it's the first race of the season next season, but, it's a very good place to overtake. You can overtake at like half the corners on the track. So Bahrain, I'd say, is one. Austria, Red Bull Ring, probably another. Silverstone, Monza, Spa, Brazil. I'd say those are probably the 6 tracks you should do a sprint race at. Because if you're going to get the excitement that you want out of a sprint race, those are the best 6 tracks I can think of where you can overtake. So, yeah. Right, let's read out some more comments from you guys in the chat. By the way, 5 more minutes. If you haven't already, 5 more minutes to vote on that poll at the top of the live chat. So if you haven't voted, make sure to get your vote in before I read out the results. And let me read out a final few comments, if I can. Flying Berserker says that the sprint was enjoyable because of the Brazil circuit itself. Yeah, it was. It definitely was. Martin Jones says sprints are good, but they're better not overdo it in terms of too many. With me, I don't know if it's just because of the way I am, but I just think if you're going to bring in a new type of session, you may as well just have it at every weekend. But I still, I still would rather us have qualifying than the normal qualifying session. I know today's sprint was good, but like Flying Berserker said in the chat, it was really down to the circuit. And obviously these cars can follow so much better, so that does help a lot. But I just think with the sprints, either have them at every race or don't have them at all. That's just my overall thoughts with it. But, because... And the reason I think that is because I don't think there should be a race on the calendar that means more than other races. I just don't think that should be a thing. I know, like, for example, in tennis, you have, your Grand Slams, and then you have, like, the Masters events. I'm, talking about men's tennis, obviously. Women's tennis, they have the same thing. You have the Grand Slams, and then you have the basically the Masters events and the women's side, and then you have your lower tournaments. They call them 500s and then 250s, and then, and basically the amount of points you score in your rank, your tennis ranking, the amount of points you score for winning the event is lower for the lower classed events. Obviously, if you win a Grand Slam on the men's side, or I think is it on both sides? I'm not sure. I think the points might be different on the women's side, but on the men's side, 2,000 to win a Grand Slam, 1,000 to win a Masters, 1,000, 500 to win a 500, and then a 250 points to win a 250. Maybe you could make that argument as to why we should do that with the sprint, but because we've never had a sprint before, it just does make it feel wrong. It also, it's the same thing with the double points at the last race at Abu Dhabi in 2014. That felt wrong because it was like, I know it's the final race, but, why does this race matter more than all the others? You know what I mean? It was just, it didn't sit right with me. But I think you could definitely make arguments that I could possibly come to agree with as to why we should have sprint races at only select races per year. So, yeah. The debate can be had. The argument can definitely be made. But, right, let me read out some other comments if I can. Martin Jones is completely understandable. I'm more down the middle. It's good if they keep it limited, like 3 or 4 less per season at tracks that are good at overtaking. It breaks up the repetitiveness. Yeah. What do you call it? Yeah, it's I'm trying to. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of. I'm trying to think of the point I'm trying to make. I can understand why some people like the sprints or are more down the middle of the sprints. I can understand completely because if it's exciting, then yeah, you're gonna, and it makes you excited, and if you makes you enjoy what's going on, then yeah, that's great. But it's just long term. Is this a thing that is going to be working for F1 and working for the fans? Because if you look, we've had, 6 sprint races in total. 3 last year, 3 this year. This is the first sprint race which was properly, very good, if not great. And the sprint races, they were meant to mix up the order a bit, I think. Or not mix up the order, but to give us a more exciting race of some sort, because one issue that everyone always mentions is obviously because we don't have refueling anymore, the cars are a lot heavier, they're a lot more sluggish in the way they handle during the races, and it does make the races a bit less exciting than they used to be during the refueling era, where it was just, pushing as hard as possible every corner for every lap of the race. But long term, is this going to be a thing that is actually going to work out and be successful? It's just, I guess I'd have to agree with Nib in that if you're going to have sprint races, if you want to make it work, you've got to do it at the best tracks for overtaking. You can't do it at tracks where you can't overtake. That would just be, you drum up more hate for the sprint. Then you would want, obviously, if you're running F1. Sarah CG says, when will this stream end so we can watch from the start? I'm going to be finishing in 5-10 minutes. So yeah, if you want to watch what I've gone through in this stream, so, don't worry, I'm not too far away from finishing. Mickey says, I like the sprints better than watching FP3, but I get why some drivers don't like them. Max says, really hope Hamilton wins tomorrow just so he keeps his 1 win every season record. Yep, that is important to remember. Martin James says, Monaco sprint would be terrible. Yeah, that would be literally the worst idea in the world. If I heard that they were going to do a sprint around Monaco, I would literally laugh my ass off. That'd be so funny. Right, I'll read out one final comment if I can. And then we'll get on to the results of the poll at the top of the chat. So you got another few seconds if you want to get that vote in if you haven't already. who you think driver of the day is in the sprint. Final comment is from Turbo. Who says, should be no reason why Red Bull cock it up tomorrow. They know which tyre works and doesn't. Question will be when to switch to medium. Exactly, because of course, you do have to switch to you have to use 2 different types of compound during the race. And obviously, there's 3 different compounds, soft, medium, hard. So, yeah. I think we're probably going to see a one-stop race tomorrow if there's no safety cars, because didn't seem to be any tyre wear issues in the race today. So, yeah, should be absolutely fine tomorrow on that front. But let's now end this poll and let's see what you guys had to say. Very close, what do you call it? Very close voting, very close finish in what you guys were voting for the the driver of the day. So again, the question was, who is the driver of the day for the F1 sprint in Brazil? The options were Russell, Hamilton, Schumacher, and Vettel. You guys voted with 38% of the vote with George Russell. Lewis Hamilton was second, only 2% behind at 36%, with Schumacher third on 14% and Vettel fourth on 10%. So, yeah. Would I agree with that? Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Russell, did brilliantly today to push Verstappen as hard as he did and finally get the move done. Really showed off just how great of a driver he is when he's on it. And, pole position tomorrow. And quite possibly his first win of his career. Remember, he's never won a race before in F1. And it could be very well that day tomorrow, and could very well be the day tomorrow where Mercedes get their first win in 2022. But guys, that is it for the sprint race watch along. Thank you guys so much for coming along today. It's been great to have you along for this sprint race, and hey, it was a good sprint race for once. So yeah, great to have you along for the stream. So tomorrow I'll be live at 4 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race begins. At 6 p.m. UK time. And yeah, firstly from 4 till 5:30 p.m. or 5:45, however you want to say it, we'll be doing the race preview. And then from 5:30 p.m. UK time till 8 p.m. we'll be doing the race watch along with the race starting at 6. And then for at least an hour after the race finishes, say from 8 till 9 p.m. UK time, I will be doing a race reaction for the 2022 Sao Paulo Grand Prix. Make sure to join me tomorrow for that, because I'm sure it's going to be a good race after what we've had here in the sprint. And of course, instead of 24 laps, it's 71 laps tomorrow. So yeah, make sure to join me for that tomorrow. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom of the right of the screen, you can do it right there. For everyone watching still, if you haven't already, on your way out, make sure to smash that like button, because obviously it does help the channel grow. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 or ChazHD on Twitter to keep up the content on my channel. And don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description for that. Great place to keep up with what I'm doing on the channel, video stream-wise and announcements-wise. And, it'd be great to have you joining our community here. But guys, thank you so much for coming along today. And until tomorrow's race watch along and race day in Brazil, I'll be live again at 4 p.m. UK time. Until then, guys, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.